to not introduce them very much because you'll see the bio running behind us. And as you know, probably which country do you think would you say is the best in immigration? That has almost the world, people of the world represented. US, right? But also it comes with its own challenges. So we're going to talk about it today. And briefly, I'm going to introduce our panelists. From my right is Heidi Guzman. She is a licensed therapist and also an immigration evaluator. How many of you know what's the role of an immigration evaluator? So that's good. So when you leave, you'll know what's the role, what does she do. We have Mike Siegel. I've known Mike Siegel from almost three years. He did all the statistics and pulled out the data when I ran for office. So he exactly told me who lives where and what and how. So that sort of helped strategize. And Mike is also, he wears several hats. One of it is he's the chairman for Gwinnett Republican Party. And Nisha Karnani is an attorney. So interestingly, I was hoping you would have the British accent, but that's completely fine. We can live with it. Don't worry. And you are coming with a lot of experience on immigration, and definitely your input is going to help us a lot today. So thank you for being here. Tracy, thank you again for coming. Apart from being an attorney in your law firm, you're also the chair for American Immigration Lawyers Association, Georgia, Alabama chapter. Exactly. And so she's the one who deals with the USCIS in the local chapters and probably nationally, and she would tell you how that interaction has been. So thank you. She's already answered us. Javeria, thank you so much for being here. You are the legal director of Asian Americans Advancing Justice. I've been involved with that organization in a collaborative level for a long time. They do a lot of advocacy work and are very good in offering immigration clinics, citizenship clinics, etc. And I forgot to ask, but do you practice, or is that some you just advocacy? Practice. Okay, yeah. So thank you so much on for. The side okay, very nice. Thank you, Javeria. Mark, thank you for being here, all the way from Macon. Who believes that you should always have a professor with you during some of these sessions, right? Because they sort of offer an unbiased portion. So that's the reason we have Mark on both the first and the second panel. So he'll bring us the perspective of academicians, but also the younger population's perspective on his students.
I can also supply the British accent.
Yes. I actually
make up for me.
Yes. So that's really good. So again, thank you for being here. And the first question that I wanted to ask is a general question that will sort of put the theme to our discussion this evening. And I would like to start with Mark. And if you all can speak on the small mic there, lapel mic, what has been your dream come true? And if you can briefly answer, what one step you took for that dream to come true?
My personal dream?
Yes. It can be related to today's evening. It doesn't have to be related at all.
Other than meeting my wife and marrying her, and she's sitting at the back there.
Hey, Margaret, that was a kudos. Very, very good. Do you want to speak on the mic?
But
yes.
but if you mean so, other than meeting my wife personally, if you mean professionally, it's an interesting question. Makes me think. I suppose that. We talk about this. One of the things I teach is externship, and we talk about living a good life in the law, and what that involves, and how to be happy in what you're doing, the sense of flourishing, and so that concept of flourishing is very important to me, and. I suppose that I would have to say that I cannot think of a better situation professionally than the one I am in now, for me. It is so rewarding to be able to work with students, to be able to think about the law, to be able to study the law, and to think of the bigger picture questions. not just about the law or immigration law in particular, but about the lawyer's life. So I suppose looking back on things, I mean, it's not like I woke up one morning in England and said, Macon, Georgia, that's where I'm going. So it's not like I formulated a dream ahead of time and said, well, I must realize this, but the sort of the way opened on the journey, as it were. And I'm very happy with what I've been doing for the last 37 years.
Very nice.
So that I think professionally would be the dream come true.
Awesome. I thought you would say one particular thing, but you sort of gave the timeline of 37 years is your.
Oh, I could speak more because I'm a professor, but you don't want me to. So
I was going to say 30-second limit, but it's just the beginning. You're just warming up, so you're good.
Thank you.
Thank you. Javeria, how about you?
I don't know if I think of things in terms of having dreams, but I will say that when I think about my current job, if I had a dream, I feel like this would be it. I get to do really cool work. I know people don't think that lawyers do cool work, but I think they do. Nonprofit, I'm not just doing direct services or just policy. And I don't know if that's also true for all nonprofits. I think perhaps our nonprofit is unique in that it does that. But I get to dabble in both state and national level policy, and I get to do direct services with immigrant community. And I think what makes it the dream job is that I'm an immigrant myself, and I've always tried to figure out what I wanted to do. I always wanted to help people, but I didn't know what that looked like. But this job gave me the answer, right? So I get to help people, but it's not just people. I feel like I do the work that I do because I'm helping my own community, right? So I work a lot with like South Asians and Muslim communities, and those are identities that I hold for myself. And so I think, this is my dream come true.
So will it be fair to say you're serving your purpose?
Yeah, I definitely feel that,
Yeah, very nice. Tracy?
So I have the privilege of owning my own firm, which means I get to choose my clients, which is a really nice thing to do. And I work primarily with immigrant victims of domestic violence and human trafficking. So that's such a rewarding area because I'm helping take people out of really dark and horrible spots and move them towards an area of independence, regaining their identities, and living without fear. So having a background, I'm not an immigrant, I grew up in Kansas, but having a family background that included domestic violence, it's really rewarding to be able to give back in that sense, and doing it within the immigrant community just makes it all that much more sweet because I feel like they've already got several negatives against them in society, so being able to help out has really been a dream.
Have you ever had to look at a client a few years after you've helped them and said, is that the same person you came into my office few years ago?
Absolutely. I mean, the smiles on faces, when they first meet you, there's the generic polite smile, and then once they have had their case approved and they're out living their life, I mean, it's just radiant, and just seeing that transformation is so awesome.
Very nice, yeah. How about you, Nisha?
Well, I actually, like a lot of our panelists, find like I'm living my purpose in my career. The other day, my husband and I were talking about if we won the lottery, what would we do? And he's like, I quit my job and I do this. And I was like, I think I would keep doing this work. I really like helping people. I work with great people. And I get to help people stay here, open their business, bring their family, try not to get deported sometimes, or keep people away from fleeing persecution. So I think I am living my purpose, and the lottery question is kind of what made me realize it, funnily enough.
Very good.
It's very, so it looks like so far I'm hearing from you all that you're in a point where you're content. It's very hard to get to that stage. So thank you for bringing that part of our conversation. Mike, how about you?
I'm also coming from academia a little bit. I spent 23 years teaching college history at a junior college. A lot of my classes were in Clarkston, and so I had students from all over the world, from different backgrounds, refugees who could not go home, people that were out of the country when there was a coup and they couldn't go back to Liberia or Sierra Leone because of revolution. And so I got to see a lot of interesting things. My academic background is immigrant history and ethnic history, mostly, not necessarily things of the recent history, but in the past. And I've always, when I was I'm almost 50, but when I was 15, I made a promise that I wanted to have an interesting life, and that when wealth, success, praise was not nearly as important as having an interesting life. And at my age, I'm coming to the point where I said I wouldn't change anything.
Very nice.
That I'm very satisfied with how things have gone. And I'm doing some political work now, not teaching, but I'll probably return to the academia eventually, because there's a lot to that academia can teach you, and also a lot of things the outside world can teach academics, especially if you're doing something that is current.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Heidi?
I've been thinking about it a lot recently, but I think besides the personal, obvious things, like getting married, having your children, that first day that you look at their little faces, besides that, I think one moment that comes to my mind was very recent, just last year, and it's when I got the keys to my office for the first time, when I opened my business and I put that key into that keyhole and I opened it, I looked at my door with Guzman Psychotherapy. I will never forget that moment. It was just life-changing. And I went into that office and I saw that empty space, and it still gives me, I mean, it's just such a powerful moment to achieve a dream in a I don't know, in 1,000 square feet. It's just amazing. It's so powerful. Something as simple can give you so much joy.
Very nice. Thank you, Heidi. So, Mark, let's get to the core of the questions. Immigration has been in existence since the beginning of this country, but if you see, the immigration statistics has really not changed. Probably it was 1.3 million around 1880s per year that people would come to U.S., and now it's 1 million per year. So, what has immigration changed in the past 100 years? And what actually propels immigration?
Yes, I actually brought some statistics to share with you all.
You're proving you're a
Of course,
professor.
I'm an academic, so I can't find my papers.
Don't forget we're all in the classroom for the first few minutes now.
Right. But while I'm looking for them, I do want to say something about the. Oh, I know where they are. The comment. See, I've got to make this comment. A phrase to share with all of you about dreams, and we use this in our discussions in externship as well. And that is that Frederick Buechner, and I'm paraphrasing, he says that vocation or calling is where your deep gladness meets the world's deep need. And I think that can be said of
Yes.
pretty much everyone I've heard on the
Definitely.
panel. So,
You didn't hear from me, but that's a different story.
well, why don't you?
I'm just
you
kidding.
want to tell us?
Go ahead. No, I'm in
okay.
from a different practicing medicine to public health to running for office to political administration to starting business. So I don't know what's the next stage, but I'm trying it all out. I'm going to settle
Right.
soon. Yeah.
Still living the dream.
Yes.
Immigration has changed. You're right that in the 1880s, certainly the turn of the century, it started to be about 1 million a year, at least for several years around there, which was the highest number, I think, historically. I'm prepared to be corrected on that, but and it's interesting because to get straight to one of the issues here. That may have played a major factor, particularly also where the immigration was coming from, in sort of a restrictionist growth of a restrictionist mentality.
And you can look at the audience as well.
Yeah, thank you. Because for the first 100 years or so, the federal government really wasn't involved in regulating immigration. for the first 100 years of the Republic. The states were. They might have various restrictions on, importation of convicts. Britain used to send convicts over, and they tried to resist that. There may have been restrictions on certain, public charge, if you like to become public charge, and so on. But the federal government really didn't get into regulating immigration until, I would say, the 1870s. I think 1875 was the first act. And it imposed some taxes on arriving immigrants, but also restricted admission of convicts and persons like to become a public charge and so on and so forth. 1882, you have the Chinese Exclusion Act. What happens then is you start getting the federal government becoming active in regulating immigration. And one of the reasons for that is that there were Supreme Court decisions that said that the states really were, encroaching on federal jurisdiction. So, but the type of restrictions that occurred, that the states have been imposing and that the federal government imposed were, you have to make a basic distinction, and bear with me if I'm sort of explaining something you already know. But, we can make some basic distinctions in immigration. And there are several issues that any country has to decide if it's going to regulate immigration. It's got to decide, for example, how many immigrants it wants, so coming to live permanently. It's got to decide what kinds of immigrants it wants, right? You're going to look for certain qualifying characteristics, family relationships, employment needs, matching the economic needs of the country in question. It's got to decide, if it's going to limit the numbers, how you're going to allocate those numbers among the different qualifying categories. It's got to decide what kinds of undesirable qualities you want. I mean, like the convicts, for example, right? People with criminal history, but what we call exclusion grounds. So there are qualifying categories and exclusion grounds. That's for immigrants. And then, of course, for non-immigrants, the same kind of thing. What categories of non-immigrants? What disqualifying grounds? And waivers from those grounds. Procedures. And I'm just scratching the surface there. But the point is that for the first 100 years, the states were, yes, they were regulating immigration, but they were excluding. They weren't having any particular qualifying categories. The federal government gets in on the act. It regulates immigration through exclusion grounds as well. And it's only come the turn of the century, the early 1900s, that there starts to be a desire to limit numbers of people entering from other countries. And that is first of all done through, and apparently through an exclusion ground called focused on literacy. And the idea there was, well, immigration is changing. It's not so much Northern European anymore. We've had a few problems with the Irish and the Germans and the Chinese, but it's been mainly from the Northern Europe. And now the immigrants are tending to come from Southern Europe and Eastern Europe, and the Jewish people with them. And how do we? We're not so sure about this. So how do we restrict that? Literacy. Because guess what? Who's literate and who isn't? Any given person, much more likely to be literate if they're coming from the Northern Europe than from these other areas. So it's a surrogate for restricting numbers. So that was in 1917, the act was passed. Come the 1920s, they started to restrict numbers directly. And you have what is called the national origin system. Basically you say, well, we're going to take a census year. It was first 1910, then it was 1920, and the 1924 Act. We'll look at which was the permanent act. We'll look at how many people from Britain can take, how many people living in the United States can trace their ancestry to Britain? Oh, that's 60%. Okay, so 60% of the quota, we'll put a quota in, 60% of that will be given to the Brits. And how many from Germany? And how many from, and guess what? that had the effect, because there were very few, relatively speaking, who'd come from Italy and Greece and Eastern Europe, and right. So that had the effect of preserving the existing demographic mix and proportionality of the existing population, and that system perpetuated right up through 1965. In 1952, you start getting other decisions being made by the federal government, such as what kind of categories do we want, what kind of qualifying categories, family unification, employment needs, but still based on the national origin system. In 65, the national origin system is eliminated as part of the civil rights era, so it gets eliminated. And you have country neutral, so every country has the same quota, basically. So you have basically quotas, worldwide quotas, you have per country quotas, you have qualifying. So this is what I call the construction of the labyrinth. If you're familiar with the Theseus and the Minotaur in the labyrinth, well, going through the immigration system is like going through the labyrinth. Well, that labyrinth gets constructed over many, many decades. So that brings us to numbers. When you look at 1965, there have been a great change since 1965. Right now, I mean, one of the things, you ask some people in polls, you say, well, what proportion of the population is foreign born? And they might say, oh, I've seen figures like 38%, 40%. Well, it isn't. It's 14% of the US population are foreign born. That's 45 million people.
Right.
45 million. And of those 45 million, 11 to 12 million are undocumented. Undocumented. And that includes not only those who enter without inspection, but those who overstay. And it's hard to get the exact figures on that, but something like 40% overstays. But then in addition, you have those who enter lawfully and admitted lawfully, and every year about 1 million lawful permanent residents are admitted. 70% of them, 70% of the 1 million who enter lawfully as lawful permanent residents who immigrate in that way immigrate under various family unification categories. 12% under employment categories, 5% under what is called the diversity program. But here's the big demographic impact. And think back to what I said about what was happening in the early 1900s when the demographics were changing and switching and the reaction. The demographics have greatly changed since 1965. Because the discriminatory national origin system was abolished, the immigrants today no longer come from Europe, but from Latin America, from the Caribbean, from Asia. So the sort of ethnic mix of this great diversity that we're having now in U.S. society. And a final statistic, since 1965, the number of foreign-born, remember I said 45 million, has quadrupled. And the percentage of the US population has almost tripled. And that number may double by 2065 if current trends continue.
Wow. Mark,
Yeah.
Mark Jones from Mercer Law, if anyone's considering to go to School of Law.
We'd love
So
to
thank
have
you. Thank you, Mark. That was a wonderful history lesson for all of us to start our conversation. So that's really helpful. Javeria, what are the challenges that immigrants face, especially when they come during different life stages? From your experience, have you seen a child coming in gets adapted better than a teenager or an adult or coming in a later stage? What are some of the challenges?
I will speak a little bit from personal experience, being an immigrant myself. I think, just a blanket statement first, like, it depends on the person, right? Some adults adapt better than other kids might. But I think from what I have seen in my family, and I have quite a few immigrants in my family, I think kids who get here before their teenage years, before they've had a chance to, develop their personality, I think they adapt more, readily than, say, adults. I was 14 when I moved here, and I had a very tough time adapting. I wasn't that old, but I think that sort of speaks to my personality, right? It took me a good 10 years to get used to the idea of being in America. Like, it took me a very long time. I'm very comfortable being an American citizen now, I am civically engaged. I understand the importance of being involved in the community and like going to vote, even if it's just the primary elections, right? But I think like when I first moved here, I would say I was definitely not that person, right? It took me a very long time. I have older parents. I have other relatives who I would say in some ways they've adapted, in other ways they haven't. So my dad loves voting. Like he will do everything that he can to make sure he votes. And even when we were in Pakistan, like we had a day off whenever it was election day, and sometimes my mom would be like, I don't want to go. He would drag her out and like make her go vote. And that's what he does even now, right? Because he understands the importance of voting. So I think in those terms, he's like very politically engaged in that way. But I think there are certain cultural things where he may not be. So he thinks I'm too Americanized. My American friends think I'm not American enough, So I think that's a struggle that always exists, and I think I see a lot of heads nodding here, and I feel like a lot of people here can relate to this struggle that goes on. I do have clients, older clients, and I think just going back to the idea of like it just depends on the person and their circumstances. They love being here. They've only been here for 6 months, or like maybe they've only been here for 5 years, and they're like ready to go and become citizens, and they're like, yes, like this is it. This is my country, and like yes, I loved my home country, but this is my life now, and like I want to be here. I have clients who are newly married. Like this, I remember this lady came in. She was from India, and she was going to apply for citizenship, and she had a really hard time because I'm sure a lot of people in this room know if you want to become an American citizen and you're a citizen of India, you have to give up your Indian citizenship, right? So she had a very tough time just letting go of her passport and her identity, and we had to talk to her about it because her kid was born here, he's American, he's not ever going to go back to India, and she understands that she wants to live here for the rest of her life. But having to give up this like core part of her personality and her identity was really difficult for her. So we had to coach her through all of that and tell her like, okay, it's, think of it for now just as like a passport and a way to stay with your family. Like, and you can be involved in like American life. You can do all of these different things. You can vote, you can be a citizen, but that doesn't mean that you have to give up who you are intrinsically, right? You still have your culture, you still have your festivals, you still have your friends. That doesn't go away. So
thank you, Javeria. That's I'm able to relate to that as well. So Tracy, we had a good lesson from Mark on immigration, and it looks like sometimes the laws that we create help us, and sometimes the laws that we create are the problems. And then we try to create laws to find solutions for the laws that we created problems for. But why do people come here illegally? Because I don't think this existed in the 1880s and 1900s.
I think the question is, back in those days, what was the legal immigration system? Was there a border patrol? Was there someone looking at paperwork? So this argument of, oh, my ancestors did it the right way, well, that irritates the heck out of me, because what was it like back then? It wasn't like it is today, where we're so restrictive, where we're checking paperwork left and right. We're checking it on the interior of the United States, not just at the border. So I think that's definitely something that we need to know about. I think people come here for so many reasons. I think about your answer about the age difference and how people acclimate. And I had a client who, it was a family from Colombia fleeing a horrible gang violence situation. And it was the parents who understood the need to flee, but the teenage daughter was so angry at her parents for taking her out of high school. So I think typically I would think, oh, the younger generation would have an easier time. In this case, it was the opposite, because she was leaving something that she didn't understand was so dangerous for her, but her parents were doing what was best to get her out of a horrible situation. So I think depending on the country, we're looking at people fleeing. Certainly we look at the Central America Triangle, Guatemala, Honduras, El Salvador, they're fleeing gang violence. And what parent wouldn't take their child out of a situation where they're sure to be conscripted into a gang, where they're sure to be raped if they're a young girl? and they're protecting their families. So I think that's definitely a big draw. I think right now we're seeing fewer and fewer people come for employment-based opportunities, for schooling. F1 student enrollment has dropped in the United States over the past year and a half because we're just not seen as a welcoming situation now, even though we have some of the best universities in the world. But people don't like the climate here, so they're not coming, which I think is a real travesty. And then, of course, we have the draw of family migration. But here's where we see words matter. The media and politicians talk about chain migration. Well, okay, I may joke that my mother's a chain to me sometimes, but she's my mom. She's not a chain. She's not made out of metal. She's my family. So we're talking about family unification here. And chain migration is such a hateful word, I think, or hateful phrase. We need to realize people are coming here because of family connections. And who wouldn't want to be with their family, usually? So I think that's really something that we need to know, too. In regards to policies and laws that complicate things, I think so much about the U visa situation. U visas were created by Congress to encourage cooperation between immigrant victims of violent crimes, generally violent crimes, and law enforcement. That sounds like a great idea. We want immigrants coming out of the shadows to report aggravated assault, sexual assault, things like that. Well, arbitrarily, they put a cap of 10,000 visas per year on that. Well, certainly we have more than 10,000 people being victims of crime per year. We want to encourage more than 10,000 people to cooperate with law enforcement. And yet, now we're at a place where there's a wait list for U visas. Right now, there's 60,000 people on that wait list, so that's a 6-year wait. We have 190,000 cases that have yet to be adjudicated. So we're looking at 25 years, potentially, to get a visa based on being an immigrant victim of a crime. And to me, that's insane. And so these are policies that can change. It's not in the law. We could change this with a stroke of the pen, and yet we don't.
Thank you, Tracy. Anisha, tell me, how has the immigrant community contributed to the nation, right? And Javeria talked about it a little bit, being an American, but what does it mean when people say, are you an American, or are you being an American?
Right, so how immigrants contribute to the country, that's something that's getting lost recently. Immigration is something that has been a source of strength for the American country for years. The way our system is set up through immigration is to kind of, it goes with the restrictions and the openness kind of flow with what America's priorities are. But I think if you look, I practice a lot of business immigration, is about half of what I do. And what I see personally and what I hear from other folks is how many jobs immigrants actually create for others. So many immigrants are entrepreneurs themselves. A lot of times, a lot of us in the South Asian community are here on temporary work visas and working towards a green card. And I think what sometimes gets lost lately is that the foreign nationals having that visa here, they're supplementing a team of Americans perhaps working on something. And if they weren't able to get here, and that talent that might be hard to find in other spaces, they may move that operation abroad anyway. So I think when the very simplistic argument is made that immigrants are taking jobs, it's not quite accurate. I'm sure that that is a situation in some circumstances, but I think the overall picture that gets blurred is that the job, having jobs here, having businesses here that create more jobs for Americans, that create more revenue, that create more tax. So on the employment side, I think what gets lost is the economic benefit of immigrants, and there's a lot of really good research on this, and it gets, just with the way things are lately, it's not a conversation about, data and facts and things like that. On the other side, on the family side, on our communities, I feel I live in Dunwoody. It's a very multinational area at the moment, and it's so wonderful. I see our neighbors, and we're out and we're learning from each other. It's a really diverse, vibrant city, and I see that people enjoy from every kind of, walk of life. We enrich each other. We enrich our communities. We do a lot of good work in our communities. And I think that on an everyday level, our neighbors and our friends see that. But unfortunately, I feel like it's getting lost, and the immigrant is getting villainized unfairly because we're not seeing what's real. The other thing that is brought up a lot lately is that, foreign nationals, and there's a lot of fear over people committing crimes and being dangerous. Again, I think that the foreign nationals are actually less likely to commit crimes. Trust me, when folks come into our office and they have some minor offense, they can get kicked out of the country. So so it's just what we see and what reliable information shows is something different, and I think that hopefully conversations like this will help focus on that.
Very nice, thank you. So, Mike, our country has been a metaphor actually, and the word melting pot has always been used, right? Do you think is that a term we should continue to use or move towards pluralism or multiculturalism? Because now, probably from 50 years ago, or as you were growing up, Mike, you'd see this, the diversity in food, in faith, in politics, in representation, in shopping, in groceries. So should we still continue to use the word melting point?
The United States, and I agree 100% with what you're saying. I think you're
Can you
right.
use the mic?
The professor was 100% right on this stuff. The United States has never had a dominant ethnic group, but we've had a dominant culture. The reasons why people came to the United States 100 years ago, 150 years ago, 200 years ago, are not that much different than they are today. As the United States popular culture was spread around the world after the 1940s, the United States was not a world power before World War II. Most Americans don't appreciate that. But we were a place people went, but we were not an idea necessarily worldwide. Today we are a worldwide idea. Hollywood movies are played all over. The American dream is no longer a dream of people from a small town in Germany or Norway or Ireland. It's a dream that is international. And if we view ourselves as people who may be from different backgrounds, going back a generation, 2 generations, 3 generations, but we share the same values: education, pluralism, the principles of the First Amendment, of tolerance, of interaction with people, of differences in order to make something even better than what either of us had in the beginning. If we get to that point and we understand that all of us, or 99% of us, agree to those things, and that's why our families came over here, whether they came over here 5 years ago or 150 years ago. If we accept that concept, then when we are a little bit of a melting pot, we're also very unified without giving up necessarily. I talk to people who immigrate I taught school in Clarkston, where people from all over the world, and I asked them about their cousins that stay behind. And they said after 10, 20 years, they realized there was a big cultural difference between those who never left the small village in Central Asia or never left the small village in Africa, and those who came over here, went to Emory University, got married, started a practice. And they view themselves as American more than anything else. But by the same token, never forget where you're from. Never forget the history, the music, the culture, the family stories. My ancestors, my Irish ancestors, came over here in the potato famine, but I still try to teach those stories to my kids, and that is what makes the United States unique. I also talk to my students. I say, where in the world would you find the best Chinese doctor, and the best Indian doctor, and the best German doctor who are studying medicine, they're studying diseases? Where would you find all 3 of those people sitting at a table? Well, CDC. And so we bring the very best people from all over the world. And don't forget where you're from, but by the same token, understand that we have a lot more in common than we realize.
Thank you, Mike. That's really useful. from your perspective. So Heidi, we know that behavioral health services or mental health services, there are several barriers for minority communities. And sometimes as minorities, we face through some prejudices, discriminations, and the impact of acculturation, what is right, what is wrong. So how have you seen, being a therapist, just the impact of going even for the therapy to express their pain that's hidden inside? Does it help them?
I think lately we're catching up with the immigrant psychology and the characteristics of how different it is. We are learning that migratory grief can be very similar to depression, for example. We are learning that there are some specific symptoms and conditions that immigrants face that we're just starting to name, and we're just starting to categorize, and we're just starting to, the APA, the American Psychological Association, and the American Psychiatric Association are debating on how to include specific conditions based on specifically migratory issues. Right now, we don't have that. We just have something that is called a V code for stressors related to immigration and not a condition itself. And there are universities in Europe that are talking about it and basically advocating to have migratory grief as a condition in the DSM-5. So they are specifics, and they're very, very similar to depression symptoms, and they have to do with the condition, of course, the nature and the character and the personality, what you were speaking about, on how the strength system that the person has to assimilate, but at the same time, the conditions of the host country when we come. You know, what structure is around that person, what support system is around it legally, socially, in terms of employment. There are so many conditions that play to that specific person that makes a difference between migratory grief or depression, and then assimilation, and then a successful path into this country. And what I love in particular about that path of psychology into assimilation into this country is what are the aspects that fail us as immigrants to not achieve our migratory dream. And the migratory grief is whatever you thought about before migrating to the United States or any other country. What is that original dream? You know, that migratory dream that gets lost in its way with the years. So when I told you about opening my office, it took me 15 years to achieve that because of the years of study, you know, from a psychologist to a counselor, you know, 3,900 hours of supervised clinical work to be able to become licensed. So, you know, by the moment that you leave and you have that idea to the moment that you can actually achieve that, it may take a person 6 months, 2 years, 15 years. So that path has so many challenges that it depends on the strength of that single person, family, child, adult, to be able to achieve that migratory dream. And we all have a responsibility. And there are some communities, ethnic communities, that are so much better as hosts than others. And that's what I always tell the families, you know, look for those resources. And if you don't have it within your family, with your friends, there are organizations. But that's, it comes to the personal strength, but also to us as a community, how well we help.
So Heidi, you're basically saying that it's okay to, because in some of our communities we don't really believe in counseling. We usually still follow the same words such as mental. You'll just get better, just go take some rest. So you're saying it's okay to talk about to a professional sort of helps gain strength. Okay.
Yes, there are greater rates of depression in immigrants after the first, second year than they were in their original country. So you see depression usually appearing for the first time in adults after they immigrate than when they are in their native countries. And why? Because of the failure of the migratory dream being achieved itself. And there's such a huge difference between somebody that doesn't achieve that migratory dream and somebody that does. And you see that risk going down when the person become successful. And it has nothing to do probably with legalization or not. You see perfectly successful, happy families that are trying to achieve that dream. And yes, probably the obstacle is, having their status being normal, but at the same time, you see a difference between, okay, they open a business or they find a different way. And mentally or psychologically, it just makes a huge difference.
Sure. So Tracy and Nisha just a shared question. As I'm doing these chai and chats, I'm learning a lot. And immigration was not my forte, but I had to spend some time. And these are the visas I learned about. So visas, I mean, they're almost like the only visas that are not there are X, Y, and Z. I believe me, A, see, the first visa says A and the last one is W. So we do have. But as I was looking at it, and the question that I have for you, it's sometimes complicated because ultimately it's about the dream. We want to settle, we love the country. What has been your recent experiences, especially with the policies that go up and down every day and changes? What is the visas that you've seen gone up, gone down? And this inside uncertainty that brings to certain families. For example, let me say the H-4 visa. So people are asking about, oh no, we thought we were fine, we bought the house, we had 2 incomes, and now this uncertainty, it kills you. I don't know if you understand, but it really does. If you can sort of share the answers, and if someone comes to you and asks, when can we get our visa? What is your response?
Do you mind if I talk about the H-4? So I'll just talk about the H-4s a little bit because it's one of my pain points as a counseling my immigration clients. So the H-4 visa is for the dependent spouse of an H-1B, so a lot of letters, alphabet soup. The H-1B visa is for a professional worker, temporary visa, and a lot of folks from India are on those visas, and because of the country of origin restrictions we were talking about earlier, when folks come for the temporary work visa and want to switch to the green card, it's going to be 10 plus years. And so the H-4 spouse is not allowed to work. Recently, there was a change that allowed an H-4 spouse to get work authorization if their spouse had met one of the milestones in the green card process. And it was really a wonderful thing because a lot of spouses, mostly Indian women, were stuck at home. They usually had the same educational credentials as their spouse did, and they were kind of couldn't do anything. And so the visa, unfortunately, in the current administration has announced they're going to take that visa away, or that work authorization away. And, the difficulty with that is that this person has already got a job, perhaps, has kind of felt this personal freedom and a sense of accomplishment, and then it's gone away. And it's a very sad thing. And there is, for anybody who has somebody in this situation, there is still a work permit for if you are an H-4 victim of domestic violence. There is a visa for that. But because of this country of origin quota, that for Chinese folks born in China and India, it's created this years and years wait. So it's created this situation for a lot of folks in H-4 status where they're really in limbo. And even for the folks in H-1B status, they're kind of waiting. Their children are younger in elementary school, middle school. They're becoming American. And yet there's this constant stress of immigration over their head. And there's also, this ability that was there to kind of alleviate some of that is going to be taken away. So I just wanted to speak to the H-4 just because that's something that I've personally helped advocate for some of the H-4 survivor relief that's there. I actually have started through Raksha, a nonprofit, for people who can't afford an attorney if they need that H-4 work permit. But generally speaking, what I'm seeing other than that specific issue is there's less certainty in the advice that I can give. I can give if somebody's doing their H-1B extension, I can't tell them, yes, you should be fine. I have to look at the specifics of their case and make sure. It's a lottery system, so I have to tell them that this is my best educated guess of what will happen in your situation with your specific facts. Everything is slow. That's what I'm telling you. Everything is slow right now. And it's really hard when you have to wait 10 years, but then it's even slower. So that's what we're seeing a lot of. And just less certainty is what I would summarize as the
So
main thing.
suppose, as a client, I'm coming into you and I'm saying, hey, I'm hearing about this H4 and all that. What should I do?
My answer is always to get individual advice on your situation with a good immigration attorney, and maybe even get a second opinion. Someone honest who's not going to just tell you what you want to hear and have you start a case. But every situation is a little different, and sometimes when we do a consultation with the family, we might find something that generally might not help most people, but for you, that may be helpful. Immigration law is so complicated, and one small detail can change what I can and cannot do for somebody. So I would say it's usually, a small investment in doing a consultation appointment, and then perhaps getting a second opinion. And that's what I would suggest. If you cannot afford immigration help, there's also resources where you can get a consultation. If you, in your gut, feel like when you're speaking to your immigration attorney, something's not right, listen to that and speak to somebody else and get an opinion. It's not going to offend a good attorney that you did that. But that's would be my advice, because there's a lot of bad information online. There's a lot of helpful information online. But I have a lot of folks who think, well, I saw on this blog that it said this, and it was actually accurate information for that period of time, for that situation, but this person, there was a new regulation since then, and then that person had something different. So it's really good to do your homework online, but get competent legal advice is the best way to go.
Tracy, hold on. So what you're telling me is there could be some hope that the family has not still realized from their individual situation. So if they are on H4, there is an opportunity to sit with attorneys like you to see if there's something, a ray of light or hope that they can see that they had not seen before.
Yeah, sometimes. I don't want to give false hope, but there are situations where I find that there may be humanitarian options, that there may be family options, that there may be maybe going to switch to a student visa might make sense for somebody. And other times it's just giving someone the knowledge that, unfortunately at this moment, under the law, at this moment in time, there's nothing. This is what you want to look out for when you're reading the news. The knowledge is the power. So even if the knowledge is there's nothing, you know that, okay, my challenge is this backlog with India. So I'm going to ask everybody who's a U.S. citizen to call their congressman and say, this quota is, a barrier for a lot of folks, and it doesn't really have any, or it may, the justifications for it may not make sense now, and it's a hindrance for a lot of folks. And so I think just having that conversation, and maybe two conversations, would be the best advice I could give you guys.
Sure. Thank you, Tracy. Sorry that took long. Just people are here so interested in the H4.
No worries at all. I just want to speak to two things quickly about the backlogs. We have what's created by the agency and the government, and sometimes that's two separate things. So when I'm thinking about agency backlogs, it can be things like the National Benefits Center. They ran out of the special paper, the plastic that work cards are printed on. That's caused like a 3 to 4 month delay in work card production, which certainly disrupts people's lives. And it was something foreseeable, but they just didn't take action to fix that problem before it happened. But we do see that impact day to day. We also had the situation about 1.5 years ago in naturalization cases where everybody has to go through, a security background check. But the way the system had been tweaked was that they could only do the first 10 letters of a person's last name. Well, not every last name is 10 letters or less. So the background checks weren't full, and people were naturalized who maybe shouldn't have been naturalized, which caused a big shutdown in the naturalization process right before the election. So we have those issues that happen day to day within the agency, and it's just about management, I think, at that level. But then we have in the actual law, we have the preference category system. What Nazir just showed you is the non-immigrant visa categories. I work mostly with immigrant visa, so family members who are petitioning for one another. And if you are, let's say, the brother or sister of somebody from India or the Philippines, you can be looking at an 80-year wait, 80, because of the way that visas are allocated. And so realistically, who's going to do that? But you want to get in line because you never know if that category is going to go away. Oh, and by the way, if you have a child who ages out, turns 21 in the process, as soon as they turn 21, they're going to go to the back of their own line and maybe wait another 20 to 30 years. And it's just an unworkable system.
Sure. Thank you again. So since we started late, we're going to end this session by 5. Karen, you can come in. So we're going to start the next session probably by 5:10. But Javeria, quickly, before I go to a general question with all of you, is tell us what's going on with DACA, because the whole conversation is not complete without speaking about the DREAM Act or the DACA. Because sometimes I keep hearing, Mike, that they're coming in and taking away our jobs, and they work for low wages, and then I keep hearing the crime rate is up where they are there. So can you just speak to that?
Sure. So for those of you who don't know, DACA stands for Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, and this was a 2012 Obama-era program which led children who had come to the United States undocumented, it allowed them to apply for work permits through which they could go to school, get a driver's license, apply for jobs, etc. There were exclusions to who could and couldn't apply for DACA, and one of the major ones was if you had been convicted of, certain crimes, you weren't eligible to apply for DACA. In 2017, right? 2017, Attorney General Sessions and the Trump administration rescinded the program, but because the courts got involved, the status of DACA, right, as it stands right now, is that if you already had DACA, so if you were a beneficiary, you can continue on renewing your application for as long as the program exists. And people who are DACA beneficiaries have to renew their status every 2 years, basically, right? So it's not a status that you just apply for once and then you're good to go. It doesn't work like that. You have to renew your status every 2 years. But any initial applications would not be accepted. There was a court decision, I think 2 or 3 days ago, out of DC, thank you, where the federal judge ruled that actually the way that the program was rescinded was illegal, and the administration has to start accepting initial applications as well. So somebody who has never applied for DACA ever, but qualifies under the guidelines, can actually apply for it again. The catch is, though, that the judge has given the government 90 days to come up with a better argument for why DACA needs to be rescinded, which is infuriating. But that's where DACA is right now. I think, and everybody knows that, I think Congress has been trying, but failing to pass a solution to the DREAM Act, because one party, so the Democrats, want a clean DREAM Act, which with no restrictions on, they just want to deal with the DACA issue. They do not want to talk about anything else. The Republicans want concessions out of the Democrats if they're going to let them keep DACA. So they're saying, okay, well, if you get to keep DACA, then we're going to cut family immigration. Then we're going to build a border wall. We're going to do all these things that are very anti-immigrant, are going to affect all these families that are already living here in the United States, right? So it's a stalemate for now, and it's very unfortunate because the administration keeps on saying, one, it's unfortunate because all these folks who are DACA beneficiaries don't really know what's going to happen to them, right? Do they get to stay? Do they not get to stay? They have only known this one country, and in many instances, if they go back to their country of origin, they don't speak the language, they don't know the culture, they know nothing. And I think it's also the other problem that I've been thing is that the administration keeps on, or has promised that these beneficiaries won't be touched, right? So they won't be deported. They're not going to get into trouble. And Tracy and Nisha can talk about it too. We have been seeing that some of these DACA folks are being picked up even when they don't have any crimes, and they are being taken to court or they are being put into removal proceedings. Last year the government actually picked up. I think at least 1 or 2 DACA recipients who were activists, basically, right? So the government was punishing them for speaking out against them. So there goes your First Amendment. For speaking out against them and putting them into removal proceedings. Thankfully, the community stepped in, other advocates stepped in and were able to help these folks get out of detention. But that's what's going on currently.
Okay, I was going to ask this question of all of you, but I'm not. The question was, is immigration politics or culture? So I'm not going to ask you that question anymore. But there are a couple of questions that registrants have asked when they registered, and if we can quickly answer those questions, and then I have a general comment question for y'all, and then we'll break out for a break. So what happens if your family goes out of status and you have an American citizen child? Will you take the child or leave him here? Leave him or her here?
Okay, so I do a little bit of removal work, and unfortunately, what we hear from some of the judges sometimes as well, that's your decision as a parent. They don't care if they're tearing your family apart, and that's unfortunate. So really, it comes down to a personal decision, but realistically, are you going to have someone here in the United States who can care for your child the way that you can care for him? What if you have a special needs child? And that's something to take in consideration too. But truly, the government doesn't care if you have a U.S. citizen child, and that's your call.
So is there a special visa for a child who's disabled, who's born here, a visa for their parents to get to the green card?
No, there's no good guy visa is basically how I describe it. Just because you've paid your taxes, you have a child with special needs, all these other great equities in your favor, there's no way to get you a green card or residency in the United States. There is what's called humanitarian deferred action. It's very case specific where you're applying essentially for deferred action, like DACA, only it's without the childhood component. And you're asking for basically 2 years of work permission and deferred removal from the United States. But again, it's a Band-Aid. But it is a way for people to live without fear, at least temporarily.
The other question is F4 to green card.
So F4 being the family-based category, it's very difficult because under the immigration law, that family category, you have to be in status or maintaining your status to get your green card here. So you're going to need something else, some other immigration status to keep you in play while you're here. If you stay here as an F4, unless remember I told you every one little detail can change everything. If your F4 petition, if you're grandfathered under an old law that expired on April 30th, 2001, there may be some wiggle room there. But if you're an F4 and you are in that category and you want to go to a green card, you have to, if you're going to be here, you need something else most of the time. The other thing I would just mention, just piggyback off what Tracy said, is if you're here, you're overstay, and your child is a U.S. citizen, your child cannot sponsor you until they're 21 under the current immigration law. However, if you've been here for 10 years and you don't have certain serious crimes, then if immigration picked you up, you might be able to try to fight for your green card in court. However, that's going to depend on meeting a very high standard of showing exceptional and unusual hardship. So again, this goes back to my old advice of you always want to seek in your situation, what your options are.
Okay, so the final question for you all is if the powers were all vested on you to be the person who's signing off on the final immigration policy, and each of you has 30 seconds to answer it, what would that policy look like? You had the baton, you had everything right now, and just for the 30 seconds, so you better do it fast.
Oh my goodness.
What is one policy you would want to address? that could change the lives?
I will secure DACA first. I think that will be I will secure DACA first. I think that's the first thing that comes to my mind. But
Very nice. Thank you, Mike.
Have a very orderly and well-understood law that doesn't change every election, and make it as nonpartisan as you can, and so it can't be bullied and pulled in one direction or the other direction. Both parties have used immigration and immigration law for their own benefit going back 40, 50 years. And there are just as many good guys on both sides as there are bad guys. And as we have, the lawyers will all admit that the law is complicated, and that's probably the biggest problem. But there should be immigration. We should have professionals. We should welcome people who want to come here who are doing a good job. But it should be orderly.
Are you running for office, Mike?
No, but
Well,
I may have a conversation with some of my friends of mine in a few days.
Okay, good. If you have anything to do with doing the rechanging the immigration policy, just give us all a call. We're all here.
I'm here to listen as much as anything.
Very nice.
I would scrap it and start over. It's like bad law, trying to fix bad law, all subject to the whim of politics. I would scrap it, start over, look at what makes sense from an economic standpoint, look at what makes sense from a humanitarian standpoint. We are a country, we are a nation of immigrants, we are a country that takes care of refugees, and we are a country that wants to keep families together. And the only thing I would say is that the ability in some circumstances to take into account what's going on with a particular family and take into account if there's some extreme hardship or something where any of us in the community would say this person needs special consideration because of this. Because the law, the way it is, it's just really broken and dysfunctional, and it's too complicated.
Tracy? Oh, here, I can share this.
Okay. So I would make two changes. I think I would get rid of all the arbitrary caps. There's caps on H-1Bs, on U visas, on family-based immigration. There's no limit to what people contribute to society and what we need here in the United States. So I would get rid of the numbers. And I would also create this good guy visa. I think if you're contributing and you haven't committed serious crimes, then what's the harm in having you here? And in fact, usually there is a huge benefit to having you here. So, although I really did like Nisha's idea, though, of scrapping it.
Awesome. Javiria?
So I've thought a lot about this, actually, and it's a very unpopular answer, but I'll stick to it. Immigration law has this thing where if you've been convicted of a crime, you get deported. You rarely have a chance to not get deported. I would get rid of that, and here's why. As a U.S. citizen, if I commit a crime, I serve my time. That's the end of it. Not saying that serving time is not hard in itself, but I can come back to society and I can rehabilitate and I have a second chance to live life again. And I think we are unnecessarily harsh with immigrants who may or may not know anything about their country of origin by the time they're asked to leave the country again, in that they have to serve their full time and then they also are asked to leave the country. So they're being punished twice for the same crime. And they, oftentimes, they've already rehabilitated themselves in society by the time that they're being asked to leave. So I have a client, for example, I'm sorry for the very long answer. I have a client right now who convicted burglary 10 years ago, heinous crime, but then he served his time, came out, and he's a completely changed person. He is loved by his community, he goes to church, he has a 4-month-old daughter, and he has a U.S. citizen wife, but he's about to get deported. So that's my...
Oh, that's sad.
Those are all wonderful answers, and they're all great ideas. There are so many ideas that we could put on the table. Some others include a point system that you could add to the current system or replace the economic categories with a point system. I'm not advocating that. I don't want to advocate any particular substantive change. What I want to advocate is how we set about doing it, how we talk to one another, how politicians talk to one another, how citizens talk to one another. I think we do need to take our country back. What we need to take our country back from is the alienation, self-alienation. We become alienated from ourselves, we become alienated from each other. And we need to restore the communication. Right now, it's in civil, it's hyperpartisan, it's tribal, there's a refusal to compromise, there's a disrespect for the truth. My goodness, somebody mentioned chain migration. Yes, words matter. Language inhabits us as we inhabit language. Chain migration or family unification. But have you seen the scary pictures of the chain migration, how one person can give rise to immigration from 100 other people? Yeah, have you seen those pictures? Well, I've seen other facts that suggest, or purported facts that suggest, that each individual immigrant may perhaps sponsor 1.8 other immigrants in reality because of the backlogs and all the other obstacles. That's a matter of truth-telling. That's a matter of respect for truth. I don't know whether it's 1.8, but I'm pretty sure it isn't 100. So let's have a better conversation, commit to honesty and truth, have courage, respect for others, compassion, empathy. Then maybe we can make some progress. Maybe we will discover when we do that DACA is a moral imperative. It's a moral imperative to give relief to these dreamers. And there's wide support across the country for that.
Thank you.
So, thank you.
We'll take one question, if anyone from the audience has, and then we'll go for a break, get our food, and we'll have the second panel back. Any questions from the audience? Anyone? Good. So it looks like you all have been listening. Oh, go ahead. Hold on here. Speak on the mic.
So I've been in this country for 11 years and stuck in green card backlog because of per country cap. I've been meeting some congressmen, and I was also part of the 100K petition that SIA had done and all that. So it's really frustrating for people like us. So, I mean, and a lot of uncertainties, like you were talking, right? So what is that we tell the congressmen, like when we meet them, that having us in this country is beneficial to them, right? How do we justify that? Is there
Go ahead.
So I think you should just speak in really simple terms. For example, for me to get my green card because I was born in India, it's going to take me over 10 years.
It's 70 years actually.
17,
based on
say
facts.
10 to 17 years. If I was born in Pakistan, it would take me 2 years. So it doesn't make any sense. The other thing I would just tell them is how it impacts your life, the ability to plan for your children if you have children, buy a home, become a citizen. If you want to become an engaged citizen, it's going to be, 17 years, plus you have to wait another 5 years after you get your green card. So it makes it harder for you to become an American when you really are. You've probably been here way longer than that period of time that you've been waiting. And then I think, what the fear of changing things on the Congress folks' side is there's a fear that the H-1B program in particular is being misused, and it is being misused. And so I think focusing on, what the misuse should be corrected, but also there's this other component that doesn't make any sense. Employers who are underpaying, employers who are not. And I think if you let them know you understand where their concern is, that it's not like you're saying all immigration is bad. I mean, we understand these are the concerns you have. This is why this particular thing I'm asking for is not something that's going to hurt U.S. workers, hurt the economy, because that's the way you kind of make a bridge between, what they're hearing on the other side. I think that usually gets through to people, and they usually hear a lot more from anti-immigration folks, and so they're really looking for some examples or some understanding of what the reality is. There are some good, Javeria may know, but there are some good resources on how immigrants impact the Georgia economy, so that can also help you as well. And I think you want to be really careful, though, about not pitting legal immigration versus undocumented or illegal immigration. There's a lot of South Asians in our community and other nationalities where they are undocumented, and that they have their own special concerns, and they're because what happens is you don't want to, in my opinion, you don't want to advocate for your own specific need and just close the door on everybody else. I think I would sort of just kind of get a general sense of what the main, like 2 or 3 issues that you think, DACA, for example, there are things that need to change that don't make any sense and don't really hurt anybody. I think that's the way to build bridges.
So having built coalitions and a staunch believer in collaborations, would it help when diverse people address the Congress leaders, or just South Asian, hey, I'm an Indian, this is what we need, versus there's a DACA supporter, there's a H-1B supporter, a green card supporter? Does that speak to huge volumes?
Thank you.
Sorry, the questions just keep coming.
That's fine. So I think either way works, right? But as Nisha pointed out, you want to educate yourself beyond just your issue a little bit, and you want to be very careful about saying, okay, so I will give an example which really upset me. I think it was last year, a bunch of Indian H-1 visa holders got together and approached the Trump administration and said, we will pay $2,500 more in visa fees so that you can build your border wall, but make sure that the backlog goes away for us. What? So things like that, right? And it's not just the H1 folks who are doing that. There are other elements, and even as somebody who works as an advocate in the immigration community, there are a lot of conversations and there are a lot of internal fights that we have, right? But the idea, the reason we're having those fights and the reason we're having those conversations is to make sure that we get to a consensus that works for everyone, right? And so, like Nisha said, when you go, talk about your issue. Your issue is foremost, but you also want to make sure that you're not saying anything that's going to harm another community. And you're able to speak to other issues if the need comes up, And the other thing I will also add to, pitting communities against each other is that we don't think of it in those terms. So, for example, last year, the Trump administration did this thing where they said extreme vetting for certain immigrants who are applying for visas from overseas. They'll have to go through extreme vetting, so they have to give up social media history and all that jazz for the last 5 to 15 years. And if they don't, God knows if they get their visa or not, right? And the vast majority of people in this country did not notice that it happened, that rule went into effect, and that it was really affecting people predominantly from Muslim countries, right? I just saw in the news the administration is about to make that a requirement for every single visa applicant coming from no matter where. So, we wait for this thing where oh, this doesn't affect us, but in the long run, this is just a test group. If it works on the test group, it's actually going to be implemented on everybody else, right? So we want to be careful about not staying quiet when it's somebody else's a test group too.
Well, thank you so much. So I really appreciate your time and your sharing the knowledge and wisdom to us today. Will you all be staying for some more time so they can come and speak to you individually and probably get your contact numbers? And so again, I feel sometimes we have an opportunity to act upon what we need to do, and just so that how Javeria and all the others suggested, learn more, not just what affects us, but around our community, and stand up for each other sort of helps. So I will continue this panel session with other panelists in 10 minutes, but I would like to call upon Dr. Neal to just thank you, the panelists, and the gifts to them. So thank you again for. Dr. Neal is the board chairman for the Quantum National Bank. So, and he's one of the sponsors for our program. So thank you so much, Dr. Neal. If you want to come by and give Heidi. Thank you.
Thank you, Nisha.
Tracy. And Javeria and Mark. Hi. Thank you so much. So enjoy your chai, and also we have some light dinner, and we'll continue this conversation in 10 minutes. Thank you. So thank you, everyone. We are going to start our second panel. Please feel free to continue to grab something to eat. And again, like I said, we usually just serve tea and refreshments. And because this is our 6-month session, we wanted to sort of celebrate it with you all and enjoy your light dinner. And the panelists can even enjoy it after the panel discussion. So quickly, again, we already introduced Mark and Karen Weinstock. Thank you for being here and for your patience. And you have your own firm. We do have your bio going on the background. You have a number of years of immigration law experience. So again, thank you for coming in this evening to share your thoughts. And you can also use the mic to speak on the lapel pen, so the video recording session catches the audio pretty well. And Raghu, thank you. One of the very few of our community members who are huge on advocacy, and especially on something that's closer to our heart, to attaining our dream. So thank you for helping indirectly or directly those who don't even know you. So thank you, Raghu, again, and congratulations for all your efforts. And Elena, it's my pleasure again to introduce you. Because if I said we have an ICE agent in our panel, everybody's going to look like. But obviously, it's good we come from experiences, different experiences. So what your shared thoughts today would sort of help many of us understand the thinking behind. And Dr. J, you are wearing several hats. Many people have asked and are very interested in the EB-5 program. But apart from that, you're also a geriatric practicing physician. So thank you for being here and sharing your thoughts. Before we head to the core questions, I wanted to start probably from Dr. J, and if you can just speak to on the lapel here. Dr. J, tell me, when we use the word green, what comes to your mind?
Word green?
Yes.
Happy.
Happy. Very nice. Elena?
Enter, yes.
Green, enter. Okay, yes.
I bought a shirt like 10 years ago, green, which I haven't used it yet.
Can you use the mic?
I plan to use it someday.
Okay, so the shirt that you haven't used, that's what comes to your mind,
Yeah.
green. Very nice. Karen, how about you?
To me, green means nature, so calm, serene, kind of outdoors.
Very nice.
Irish night.
Very nice.
It's one of my favorite nights of the year in Macon, which we haven't had for the last couple of years, but hoping to get back soon when Harry O'Donoghue comes down and hosts Irish night.
So that's really good. I'm just surprised nobody said green card. Aren't you?
Who are in limbo, they will say.
Raghu? Okay. So, Mark, we're going to start the questions with you. And for the reason we want to just make it short because we're running out of time also. But we talked briefly about it. The laws, right, are complicated and are changing every time. In fact, the previous panel suggested what policies they would change. But let's talk about solutions now, right? So we talked about the challenges in the previous panel. And Mark, how do people who want to come into this country now, do you think they're more aware of the changing laws, or do you think it's the same interest to come into this country compared to 20 years ago? Or what should they do now or know now than before if they're planning to come and settle here? And they're just thinking, maybe I should go to U.S.
Difficult to answer that because probably awareness varies from place to place. I think maybe what you're driving at, are there misconceptions out there about...
Yes.
I would, now I'm speculating, but I would think that a common misconception would be, oh, I've got an engineering degree or whatever it might be, and I look and I can see that, you know, there's something called employment first. I may be a super engineer, or employment second. I have an advanced degree, or employment third. I can immigrate to the United States. And people in this room, of course, are very well aware that you don't just have to qualify in a particular category. You have to know how long you have to wait to be able to immigrate. I suspect, too, that people may not be as aware of all the non-immigrant opportunities that there are, possibilities for getting a non-immigrant visa, perhaps an H-1B. They say, oh, but if they are, they look at it, they may not know about the backlog there. So I would think there isn't much. I'm not sure how people find out when they're abroad and get good information. I know when I came over to this country, I came over as a J1 studying at the University of Michigan, and I called the University of Michigan and I said, well, am I going to be subject to the two-year home residence requirement? They said, we don't know. Call the consulate. I called the consulate. They said, well, we don't know. Talk to the University of Michigan. I felt like a tennis ball. And so I had to do research on my own. Now, but if there are immigration attorneys that you can get in touch with to shepherd you through the process, whether they're practicing abroad or in the United States, because we have social media now, you can contact anybody on internet. And I think it's connect with an immigration attorney as soon as possible
So with
to work out a good strategy.
With a single word, if I came to you and I'm from India and I'm an engineer and I said, hey, should I come to US?
So I get this question a lot.
Yes, Karen,
I'd like
go ahead.
to just comment, if you don't mind. So I do get this question a lot. People finding me on LinkedIn and online, and just, I know I have a computer science degree, and I'm from India, and I want to come here. And really the biggest hurdle that most people have is finding a sponsor. It's not qualifying for the H-1B visa, because a lot of people are qualified. They have education, they have, work experience, but really is finding the employer. And so it's a chicken and egg thing, because if you don't have a visa, you can't get a job. If you don't have a job offer, you can't get a visa. And even if you do have a job offer and meet all the qualifications, you may not get an H-1B visa, because if you don't have a U.S. master's degree, your chances are maybe 1 out of 3, maybe 1 out of 4 to even get selected in the lottery to get your leg in the foot in the door kind of thing, maybe. So the situation really is yes, there is a desire to come here. Also, a lot of clients are very well educated, whether it's from India, whether it's from Europe, and they know that the Trump administration is making things harder on everybody. And so, and there's a lot of, there's misconceptions on one hand where people think, oh, I qualify, so I should be getting an H-1B pretty easily. So that's one misconception. Well, not so easily, and you have to have a job offer. It has to be bona fide. You have to go through all of this. And most employers are just not going to hire somebody unknown, let's say from India, who maybe they have a fabulous degree and a fabulous experience, but they're just not going to hire them right off the bat. And so a lot of people do realize that, and they come earlier, in an earlier stage on a student visa, and hoping, okay, once I graduate, maybe I get my master's here, I'll get OPT for 1 year, I'll continue, I can get a job, and then my employer will sponsor me. And that's really the way that most people get in.
Sure.
So
Karen, that sort of helps me segue to the question that I had for you. Sometimes is it the best of one world, or is it the best of both the worlds, right? So the question I'm going to ask is about citizenship. So now you have your green card, and what are we really waiting on? Are we still deciding whether we want to stay in US or India, or looking at the pros and cons? Why haven't anyone applied for citizenship? Have you seen such, and what is your recommendation?
So for some clients that their home country does not allow for dual citizenship, like India, people want to stay on green cards for a long time. They just don't want to file for citizenship because they're afraid, oh, well, I'm going to lose my Indian citizenship. Even if they've been here 20 years, they're not going to go back, or, they have parents there. And so there's really, is I think is more a psychological type of block. I see it also from, for example, citizens of UK. Oh, but I can't lose my British citizenship. And even in the UK, you can't lose it because the UK allows for dual citizenship. So a lot of it is really the emotional connection to the home country, thinking, okay, I will file for a green card and I will lose everything back home. I'm not going to have my safety net back home, even though, you know. But really, my advice to everybody who qualifies for citizenship, meaning you have a green card for 5 years or more, you have good moral character, which means no criminal issues, you've lived in the United States for the majority of the time, those are the main qualifications to apply for citizenship, is to go ahead and do it. Because there's a lot of unknowns that might happen. Immigration law might change, and even if it doesn't change, and it stays the same for the next 20 years, which I hope it won't, because there's a lot of issues, I heard you discuss that in the recent panel, that if, for example, by accident, you drive a car and you hit somebody and you kill them. You didn't intend to, but you have a vehicular homicide, you're going to lose your green card and you're going to get deported. And everything that you built here is going to be gone. It doesn't matter if you have U.S. citizen kids, U.S. citizen spouse, it doesn't matter. You're going to be gone. So your life that you built here can be gone in a second, because as long as you are not a U.S. citizen, you are still considered a foreign national or an alien, which is also a word that I think should be removed from the immigration law. It's awful.
Yeah, coming from space.
Yeah, alien, yeah. Yeah, when I think of alien, I think, and that's when I started practicing immigration law about 20 years ago. That's why, alien, what is an alien? Like, you know.
Right, okay.
You picture somebody green with, you know, with antennas, right? So the word green.
Yeah, so better go get your green card. So Karen, wow, so that's something that I learned, something new. Even the ones with green card are put to the same atrocities, or maybe that's the law, as someone with no citizenship.
Unfortunately, that's true, and Elena might talk about it a little bit, but you know, I've had situations with many clients of my law firm that basically, you know, committed a crime unknowingly, or pled, or committed a crime knowingly and then pled to an offense. Their criminal lawyer said, "Oh, it shouldn't be a problem. It's Georgia First Offender Act. You're going to get just probation, and you're not going to have any problems." But under the federal law, it is a deportable offense, or it might be even an aggravated felony, the way that the sentence is written. So the person is mandatory detention now. They're going to be in a detention facility with all the murderers and the rapists and everybody else, and they're going to be deported without any chance for a bond, without the chance of ever getting anything, any immigration benefit.
Thank you, Karen. I got my citizenship a few years ago, and I realized at some point I have to decide and put my foot on one side. And I guess my kids just know this country, so now I see the benefits of being a citizen. So that's something we all have to think about and talk to our friends and colleagues and families, and decide, you know, where we want to be really.
And one more point, I think for the majority of the countries, even if you give your citizenship back to get the U.S. citizenship, you can always get the citizenship back if you decide to move back home.
That's a good point,
You can always get that citizenship back. So it's not like you lose it forever, you just, it's a psychological barrier, I think, more than anything else.
Yeah, I actually forgot to mention earlier, we did have a panel who had signed on to be on this panel from the Indian Consulate Service, but because of an emergency, he couldn't be on the panel, but we wish him a speedy recovery. So thank you. Raghu, let's go to your story. Very interesting, I read your bio, but tell me, what have you done differently than most of us? Our community doesn't usually get into the advocacy part. We're usually standing in the back where that someone else will do our job. But tell me how important it is for each one of us here and for others, and what does advocacy really mean, and especially on the green card backlog, and how it has impacted you, your family, your friends.
Thank you, Nazira, and thanks for giving me an opportunity, and also the people in the green card backlog an opportunity to come and share their stories here. My advocacy started back in 2015. I came to the United States in 2005. My employer applied for my green card in 2011. That's my priority date in category EB2. And I was thinking based on the years, I'm going to get my green card in like 4 or 5 years or 6 years down the road. And I was doing extension. My employer was doing the extensions. And in 2005, a couple of things happened. One is President Obama signed an executive order giving people ability to file adjustment of status who have approved I-140. And also ability for the spouses to work. That time, we were hoping that we could go and file the adjustment of status, but later on, we found out that there was some special interest group that went and lobbied against it for people not able to file it. But at end of the day, like USCIS came up with a rule telling that only a particular percentage of people were able to file for adjustment of status who have an approved I-140. That time, community like me and people who are in the green card backlog came together, and then we sent out a 100K petition to the White House. And after a few months, President Obama replied telling it was a very generic message that you high-skilled immigrants are generic in the fabric in the society, and we want these kinds of immigration to happen, but that message did not address what the petition we requested for. And then I started researching about what these numbers, why this is taking so much time. That's when I realized this is not about the number of years you wait. It is more about the number of green card numbers available for Indian nationals who have applied in the category EB2 and EB3. That is the reason I came into this advocacy back in 2005. And then why this backlog, right? It is because United States offers 8% of its green cards per year to skilled immigration, EB2 and EB3, whereas in Germany offers 81% of their permanent residency is given out based on their skills immigration. And then Canada offers 25% of its immigration for skilled immigration. United States offers 1 million green cards per year out of 86 persons, which is 860K goes to family immigration, diversity, and then lottery and other visas. And then the other 6 persons like EB1, EB4, EB5, about 60K is given up per year. The other 8%, which is the 80,000 visas, are given out to EB2 and EB3. In this 80,000, there is another caveat, which is there is a 7% country cap applied on this 80,000 visas. So that comes down to 5,600 green cards per year given out to Indian nationals who have applied in this category, including their dependents, which means like about 2,500 to 3,000 families get their green card out of 1 million green cards awarded each year. How many people are, for example, like people who applied in 2007 and 2008 may have to wait about 4 to 5 years from now. People who have applied in around 2015-16 have a wait anywhere between 25 to 90 years. People who are applying in 2017 are planning to apply in 2018, they have to reincarnate to stand in their line next year. So that's where it is going on. So this is the math behind it. How do we suffer because of this, right? Every 3 years, we have to renew our visa.
You can speak to the audience.
Yeah, like my employer has to renew my visa, and every 3 years we have to, every time we get out of the country, we have to go for a stamping. When we go to the stamping, this is never no one goes in confidence that they are going to get it. Always like we carry like this much big of documents with us. That's almost half the size in our carry-on baggage. So we go there, We go for the visa stamping. Sometimes it goes fine. Sometimes they give a 221G, and then we have to wait for like 4 weeks, 6 weeks. And then we have to call the employer in and tell, I'm stuck in this visa consular processing. You need to hold my job there. So these are the things happen. That is point one. And in Georgia, we have to, our driver's license is tied to our visa. So I go to driver's DMV to renew my license. Say my old visa expires on April 30th, and my new visa starts on May 1st. I have both the documents that proves that there is no gap. I go to the DMV. You know about DMV. So I go there, stay there for few hours, and then we go to the counter. The person in the counter looks at it and says, like, you have to come on May 1st. I cannot give you on today. Sometimes I used to, now since I've started doing advocacy, I go there, stand and talk to them, have discussion and get things done. But there are many people who does not know about it. They come back home after spending a couple of hours or 3 hours in DMV, and then they go on May 1st. In order to go on May 1st, what they do is they have to leave their kids if they are in pre-K or daycare. They have to ask their friends or someone to go leave their kids there, and then they send their kids to the school, and then they take a Uber or a taxi, go to the DMV, spend another couple of hours there, take a break from their office work, and then they get their driver's license renewed. Sometimes it doesn't go through either. They have a connection between USCIS or something like that. So they'll give a temporary license, and then they will ask us to come back a month later. So this is driver's license thing. When we talk about other things like loan, back in, I think, 2013, I went to a local credit union to apply for auto loan. My visa is expiring sometime in September, and I was applying sometime in April. So the credit union said, okay, everything checks out, like your credit scores, your salary, and everything, right? And then they say, I can approve your auto loan for 6 months. I actually asked for a 5-year loan. They said, because your visa is ending on September, I can only give you auto loan for 6 months. Why would I even take an auto loan for 6 months, right? So I have to run around for a few other places to get a loan sanctioned. And my wife, she's on H-4EAD, she's a dependent. She's a microbiology graduate. Because of that, she doesn't want to come into IT. She is like a healthcare person. So she couldn't able to apply for many positions because of her microbiology background. It is labs and research. The minimum they ask for is a green card or a U.S. citizenship. So in 2015, President Obama gave the H-4EAD executive order. She got her EAD, so she thought, like, do I need to spend hours in, if it is microbiology, like I have to spend hours and hours in the laboratory, I cannot spend time with my family, so I'm going to look something else. And then she decided she wants to do nursing. And she's currently a nursing student. The challenges she faces are, she currently pays international tuition fee after living here for 13 years. We are living in Georgia since 2008. We are not qualified for in-state tuition fee. And in order to get something waived, she's got to run between the buildings. Like, she got to go see the college president, the program director, and a few other people. And the international tuition fee came down to out-of-state tuition fee for a semester. So she got to do this again the next semester, but they did not promise that they are going to give this waiver this time. The other thing was, she ran as, like, she was paying the fee in the finance department, and there was an immigrant, like, that person was here only 2 years ago or something, and that person qualified for in-state and everything. And she came on and asked, like, why are we not qualified for it, in spite of paying all these local taxes and all. That is something. And this is the challenge we face day in, day out. But so this is our personal experience. But how many such people are in these backlogs, right? What are the numbers? Why such a long line? There are about 300K primary applicants in this backlog. Out of this 300 primary applicants, about 150 are US born kids, and then 40K like they're dependent kids, and then 20,000 doctors. And then there is 50 to 90,000 dependents who are on H4 EAD, and this is the number. And what we are thinking is like there are few bills in the Congress that would give us a relief. That's what we are working on. But this is my story about my wife. Similarly, there are many H4 EAD people out there, but what in the news and media, everyone talks about DACA, right? So they are childhood arrivals. They are not. They should be given a pathway to citizenship, but there is one part, like the dependent kids of H-1B workers. They come here at the age of like 5, 6, and also at the like when they were like babies, or even when they came here at when they were like 10 years old, 12 years old. They study in the local schools. They do not have SSN. So when these H1 people are in the backlog, 10 years, 12 years, when they turn 21, they go out of status, which means like they have to apply for a F1 student, or they have to deport from this country.
Sure.
So when that happens, right, there are like many bills out in Congress, like DREAM Act, Bridge Act, Secure Act, but none of these acts includes these kids.
Got it.
And these kids, there are many kids who have already aged out, who are on the verge of aging out, and many kids are still in their 10 years old, 15 years old in this. And the other thing is, since they don't have an SSN, if they excel in sports, they don't qualify for certain sports. They cannot apply for certain teams, and they do not qualify for scholarships. They do not qualify for certain things at the school either.
Sure.
So
Raghu, looks like that's a real story, and I can see lots of struggles and anxiety in running a family. So thank you for sharing that, and definitely I'll come back to you and Karen, and we'll continue this conversation. And again, thank you for sharing this story, which is so true for many, many, many more families who don't have a mic to speak today. But Elena and Jay, sorry for the long wait, but like they say, you keep the best for the last. Elena, tell us about your experience about not just opening your own firm to practice to help the visas for asylum or refugees, but also your previous experience as a deputy chief counsel. And if you can speak on the small lapel mic, yes. Yeah.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah, is that?
Okay, so I was, I don't know if a lot of you may not know, but there's a very large immigration detention facility in South Georgia called the Stewart Detention Center, and it's one of the largest ones in the country. Anyone that is caught, or say they're pulled over for a DUI or anything like that, anyone that's caught in North Carolina, South Carolina, or Georgia will end up at the Stewart Detention Center, and also people that are they may come in over the border, and if they don't know who they are, they've lost their IDs or something, they'll end up at the Stewart Detention Center because it's also a national security facility. And they put people there that are terrorists, actually, and they also put people there that they're not sure who they are and things like that. So I originally I'm from DC. My whole career was federal government attorney. For about 37 years I was in the federal government. And my last 3 years, I was the deputy chief counsel at that facility, which meant I was supervising the ICE attorneys that were going into the immigration courts. There are actually immigration courts that are located within this. It's a prison, actually. It's a medium security prison. And there's 4 immigration courts in there. And so there's about 8 or 10 attorneys that go in. They prosecute the removal proceedings against the individuals that are in this facility. Because it's a remote location, there are not a lot of attorneys that go there. It's a lot better now, actually, than it was 5 years ago. But 5 years ago, there was very, very few attorneys that went down there. As a result, a lot of people were not getting due process. And so when I did end up retiring from the government, I ended up opening my practice about 45 minutes away from there. And I represent 100% of my removal defense practice is at the Stewart Detention Center. So I do pretty much almost all asylum from all different countries, and it makes a huge difference to have attorneys that are on site that will do that, because there are a lot of people that might win their case if they have an attorney, and if they don't have an attorney, they have no way of understanding what they need. They don't really understand the process at all. So. The one thing I will say is that the Southern Poverty Law Center's down there now. There are a lot more attorneys that are, and the Southern Poverty Law Center's doing bonds to try to help people get out. One of the main problems with people getting out, like I said, is if they don't have a passport, they're not going to be released. And so a lot of people think that if you throw away your passport and even if you get denied asylum, that they'll eventually let you out, and they might. But it could be years by the time that happens. So we had quite a few people from Guinea and Pakistan, actually, that were throwing away their passports in 2016, the summer of 2016. And summertime is a big time when people come in at the border. And they all come in through Mexico, even though they're from all these different countries. They go through an amazing number of countries, Brazil and Nicaragua and all these different places up into Mexico. There's other kinds of countries, Eastern European countries that come in, for example, Albania, Armenia. Those people get tickets to just fly into Mexico and say they're going on vacation. So they fly in there and just go up to the border and come in. So there's all kinds of different ways. People from China are coming in that way. A lot of people think of the southern border as being mostly people from Central America coming in that way, but it's just everyone comes in that way.
So how do you feel from this side to that side? How do you feel? Do you feel different? Do you feel you're helping more? Are you feeling you're serving your purpose? And I'm just curious. It's just like a complete transformation on whom you were putting behind bars, and you're helping them out of.
Well, I mean, a lot of people that are at that facility, many people at that facility are convicted criminals. I don't want to give everyone the impression that everyone's just, that haven't done anything. There's a lot of people that have aggravated felonies. Like I said, I had clients there that they had set fire to airplanes. They had done a lot of things, mafia people, so there's all those people. When you're prosecuting those people and they're going back, they're going back, they've done something really bad. The other people, the job of the prosecutor is to go in there and not necessarily deny relief to somebody. That's not your ability. All you can do is go in and say what the law is and whether this person is or is not eligible. It's up to the judge to decide that. So I think being a prosecutor, it is necessary to have that person there, because they're not, they're prosecuting anyone that comes before them. It's the judge that's making that decision. The problem you have in the 11th Circuit, which is where we are in Georgia, is that it's very conservative, the courts. So if people come in from certain countries and they end up in Chicago or they end up in New York or even outside of DC, they have a much greater chance of being granted asylum, because in general, not only the judges are a little more liberal, but the circuit court decisions are more liberal. So a lot of people, it's just the luck of the draw. Somebody might end up in Texas and they may get released. Some people end up, their friend might be with them. Their friend ended up at Stewart, and the judges there aren't going to release you on bond unless you have a mother, father, somebody that's going to apply for you. They're very conservative, the bond. So as far as me personally, when you're an attorney, you're trained to look at both sides and to, you're able to do both sides. Obviously, when I worked there, I did feel bad for people that didn't have lawyers, but the people that had committed crimes, I didn't feel as bad for. I mean, obviously, we don't want anyone to get deported, but there's nothing you can do about it if there's no law that can protect them or that can let them stay. When I left, it wasn't for the purpose of turning around and representing people. It just seemed like I knew there was no one out there doing it. So, and I knew that I could do it because I had a lot of experience. I had 20 years at the Board of Immigration Appeals before that, so I just knew that I was going to be able to do the asylum pretty easily.
Thank you, Elena. Dr. J, finally we get back to you. I've done a lot of high fives with my kids, but tell me more about EB-5.
Sure. So it is. First of all, thank you for arranging this meeting. I'm also an immigrant, and lack of information is something that we all suffer through because there are always solutions available. EB-5 is one of the positive sides of the immigration program in which everybody wins. You are able to get the green card for your family, spouse, and children under the age of 21 that is unmarried. Also, you are contributing to U.S. economy to generate jobs by making investment in U.S. economy. So generally, projects that otherwise would not have happened in the areas would happen. So it's a great program. It's investment-based immigration. It also is an old program, one of the few programs that has not been fully subscribed in past. Now it is, in last few years, it has been fully subscribed. So the basic information about the EB-5 program is it is employment-based fifth category. But it is a employment-based program. That means it is generating employment, not giving you employment. The basic EB-5 program calls for, it used to be called a $1 million green card. So you invest $1 million in the US economy, you create 10 full-time permanent jobs for Americans, and your family gets to migrate to United States. It was underutilized program, and there was always 10,000 visas quota. For first several years, it was put in place in early 90s. It was not utilized much. So Congress went back and said that why? All of our other immigration programs are fully utilized, there is backlogs, why not this particular program? And what they found was the problem was that of compliance. Many people invested $1 million and they started their business, but such a complex program, they really could not put in place a immigration attorney or a accountant, the professionals that would allow them to comply. So with that, the program was not successful. Congress went back and put in place a pilot program and said that, and also some part of it was that $1 million was too much, but that was needed to generate the jobs, that 10 jobs you were needing to create. So Congress came up with this pilot program and said that how if we find some US companies that would take the responsibility of compliance, complying with those 10 job creation, submitting the documents as needed, helping and guiding this group of investors through. Along with that, we would reduce that amount. Instead of $1 million, we would allow for $500,000 in a specific areas where unemployment is high, 150% of national unemployment average. What is called a targeted employment area. We also have several other programs in finance on the bank side. We get tax credits, and that falls in the CDFI, the community development funds, etc. So similar way, they gave authority of designating those areas to the state governor, and governor would designate the agencies that would designate, that says that this particular area is designated as targeted employment area, or TEA, and in projects in those areas will qualify for $500,000 of investment. Okay, so that is the basic of EB-5 program. Lack of information, again, is 25 years ago when I came in, physician. I could have started, I came in September and I came to know on 6th of January, the year after, 3-4 months later, that if I had gone to Oklahoma and applied for license, just 7 days before, 31st of December, that regulation changed, I could have gotten the license and I would have started practicing. But because I came to know on 6th of January, now there is no state in US, I must go through residency training again. I had done internal medicine, and go through residency training, then apply for medical license, and it was lack of information. And just for a few days, if I had come to know about, I qualified for everything just a week ago.
Sure. So, Dr. J, tell me, to get to someone so that they understand fully. Suppose Raghu here comes to you tomorrow. Would he be your typical client? And he says he has 200K. I'm just trying to see how it works.
Absolutely. I think the rules for, you have to invest $500,000 in US economy, and that has to be responsible for creating these jobs impact. When you go through regional center, it is not jobs, it is jobs impact. When you say jobs, those are heads you count. When you say jobs impact, a regional center was given a few more concessions. One of the most important concession was that we would allow the regional center to not only count the direct jobs it is creating, but also allow indirect and induced jobs impact, economic impact it creates in the community where the investment is made. So if you take example of a hotel, which is simple to understand, you build a hotel, in the construction you have employment that you get. But also there are 15 people working in that hotel, or a hospital, which is similar one. Those people who are working directly are the ones that count as a direct jobs. But when you go through regional center, the companies like ours, Midwest Center for Foreign Investment, you are allowed to count now that for their hotel or hospital, you are going to send out your linen and laundry to a neighboring cleaners. The job impacts that it is creating is indirect jobs. Now, because you have hospital here, you are going to have pharmacy, you are going to have gas station, you are going to have restaurants around to serve those people that is coming in, etc. That is induced jobs impact. All of that ultimately is creating economy in that area and creating jobs. So as a regional center, you are allowed to count all of those, right? Regional center is also allowed to pool different investors like Raghu that can come in. It is also allowed to put non-EB-5 money into the project, and jobs impact for non-EB-5 as well as EB-5 funds the benefit of that can go to the investor. So there is a pretty significant multiplication factor you get, and the investor does not have responsibility now to prove and comply with it. Of course, Department of Homeland Security goes through and does a lot of different due diligence on the principles of these centers. Interestingly, I had not filed for citizenship for many years. For 15 years, I was a green card holder. It was the sentiments, like you said. I just didn't want to let citizenship of India go. Since then, India has now what is called the overseas citizen of India. It is not dual citizen, or it is not a two-way street, but you can get OCI and you can get US citizenship. While applying for 10 years ago, this regional center, I was encouraged to become citizen. When filing for the bank and being a director in the bank, Dr. Neil, I was not encouraged to become citizen, but while going through due diligence for approval of a regional center, I was strongly encouraged to become citizen. That is when I became citizen. So this is a solution of what was the downside of it. Also, where the question really is, where does this money come from? There is a misconception in the current rules, which is likely to change this September 30th. Currently, the money can come from your country of origin or from US. Money can come, it can be gifted. What the investor or the applicant has to prove is there is a legitimate source of money. And when you say legitimate, why the source of funds is a requirement. And very appropriately, US government does not want hot money. And when I say hot money, is money that is associated with drugs and terrorism. So very clear about it. So many of the Southeast Asian folks applying, 99% of it is between India, China. China is number one, 90% of it goes to China, EB-5 visas. So China, India, Taiwan, South Korea are the four nationals that really take 99% of it. The issue with Southeast Asia is a money, tax-evaded money, what we call black money or two-number money. It's not white money. And so this is tax-evaded money. It is not hot money. But you still have to prove source of funds. Currently, you are able to use money that is earned in US, use money that is gifted in US by family members, or even can be friends. No blood relationship is required. Or money that has come from your country of origin, from extended family, or gifted money from anyone. That is likely to change in what is called an Integrity Act. There is a bill, and I appreciate Raghu getting involved in advocacy. Getting involved in this regional center, I had to get involved in advocacy. I come from Louisville, Kentucky. Senator Mitch McConnell belongs there. So on 23rd of March, this was going to be changed. I still travel back and forth, but I spend one night there. Before 23rd of March, on 22nd March, I was there consecutive 6 nights, basically for advocacy, reaching out to Senator's office and saying that these changes you are putting in, there were 2 changes. One, increasing $500,000 to $925,000. Second was Integrity Act, in which you are saying the money that comes in has to be earned by you or a first-degree blood relation, has to come from outside United States. And so that we could fortunately get that extended up to September 30th and say that, we really need to look at that. Those people, for example, the H1, and many of the physicians are in there. Thousands of physicians, just like IT guys, are in there, in the same group. J1 waiver, they have gone through J1 waiver, and they have 2-year requirement that Mark mentioned, that they have to comply serving back to the country or serve in some rural area in US. All of those would be disqualified if that was to happen. So we do have that extension. IIUSA, and there are a group of regional centers that supports Coalition for EB-5 that does advocate to not really make the rules in a way so that there is a particular group of people would not qualify for it.
Got it.
So he's a very typical, actually he can go to Dr. Neil's bank and get a loan on the house.
For the
you have bought here.
300,000, so he has
Yes.
200,000. He's able to account for that. So you're saying he can get 300,000 from Dr. Neil's bank?
He can, and that is allowed. You are allowed to borrow money. The gifted money is allowed. You are allowed to borrow money. Borrow money with collateral. Of course, there are qualifications, so each individual situation can vary. But this is a great solution for professionals who are in this field. Really, your average is 7 to 10 years they have been here. Usually the spouse is on H4 EAD. And the two provision, one thing that is not talked about that was very concerning, I'm going to bring that on behalf of this H1 and H4 EAD. One thing that was proposed was not issuing these H4 EADs. Second one was actually those who have I-140 approval, they keep on H1 visa and I have been on H1 visa, so very familiar with it. I have been on several of these almost everywhere in the alphabet. So the 140, those who are approved, H1 has a limit of 7 years. You can be on H1 status, and you can correct me if much of that has changed. 6 plus 1 year of some kind of extension, 6 plus 1. But maximum allowed was 7 at that time that I studied. And I had the privilege of going and studied Code of Federal Regulation in the books when it was not an internet. I didn't have money and my H1 visa was rejected because I was a physician required to have license. But anyway, so those who have 140 approved, they are getting extensions. That was one of the proposals, which was very scary, that you are when you get your 140 approved and you get your green card, you come back, but till then we will not extend your 140. So H4 EAD is a one significant part. But if you are above that 6 or 7 year status, years you have spent, and you are on that 140 extension, that was very scary. That was harsher than H4 EAD situation, okay? So both of these 7 to 10 years, usually you have a family in here. They have made significant money. Net worth is significant. And now you have bought house, you have collateral here, you have investments, you have 401k, retirement money, all of those is there. All of that counts. If you have significant collateral, part of this money can come from borrowed money. Which is important for people to know because everybody comes and asks, I have $400,000. And I didn't know, I just paid my $150,000 dentist from Austin. $40,000 of student loan I had, I paid. And I put $150,000 HELOC I had, I paid that off. Yes, you can borrow money, and that money is a good money to be utilized. As a matter of fact, from my perspective, assisting people, money that comes from US is a better source to me because it's simple for us to go to DHS and give them a transcript permission and say, you can go and check it out. This money is earned in US, your tax returns, easy to verify, rather than checking it from foreign country source.
Sure. So sorry for, it's just that been an interest and many people who've registered have asked this EB5 questions. So suppose he comes to you and you help him secure that $500,000 because you go through each client detail, and then you are able to file, you find nothing wrong, everything is in good standing. Would he benefit because he might have just 3-4 years more for his green card?
It depends on how many years. Currently, it is taking about 22 to 24 months for getting your EB5 approval. It depends on, we are filing with a pulmonary and critical care doc. His wife is an OBGYN, filed under EB2 in 2014. That is going to take 13 more years. If it is 3 or 4 years, it is questionable about what you get, what really you are behind. If you have a child, and that happened with my brother-in-law, 2004, June 2004 was his approval, EB2. He got February 2018, he got his green card in his hands. Daughter became 27. She is graduating on May the 12th from University of Louisville. She's a dentist, paid international fees, 3 times the fees. That's a lot of money. How I know? I'm a guarantor on her fees she's paying, all the loans she's taking. So, because she did not have green card. And in that circumstances, it would have been worth it for her to have gained that 4 years, right? Because if she considers in-state, she studied at University of Louisville before going in dental school, she would have benefited. She would have saved a couple $100,000 just in the fees. So it goes on individual situation as to how much time you have and what is it that you are losing on the other side, right?
Sure. And so they pay the 500,000. I know it's an investment, but I'm not really, really good on financials. Does that mean once they get their green card and you say bye, or do they get them? Are you
Once-
saying you pay us 500,000 and I'll give you a green card?
You're
Is that what it
making- You're
is?
making investment, by law, the investment has to be at risk. I'm in banking for last 11 years in Georgia. Everybody knows the banking industry, what it has gone through in last 11 years in Georgia with economic downturn. It depends on what you are investing in, but it is an investment, the money is at risk. The kind of structuring we have put in, it is very similar to putting money as a CD or fixed deposit in the bank. Now, it is not FDIC insured, but what we have in a general rule, one of the problems of compliance also was that after putting $1 million, creating 10 permanent jobs, at the end of several years, these investors were losing money. Instead of $1 million, they were taking out less, and they were not able to comply. The structure we have put in is we create a fund. We pull all this money and make a loan to a solid project very similar to bank. Whatever quantum banks uses, the loan documents are the similar loan documents used. Individual cannot take guarantee, but the business you are in, the fund, it is business is to make the loan and take collateral. So we take first security collateral of the project if we are making significant money. We don't make loan at more than 60% loan to value. So we make it pretty safe. We were able to prove to Homeland Security and USCIS that yes, that investment is at risk. You know why? Simple. So many banks closed down. People who bought shares in the banks lost the money. So it is very similar structure. Relatively, it is safe. Same way, the return is low. So, safety and your reward on that goes hand in hand.
Mental peace.
Risk, exactly.
Okay.
So you have practically at the end of investment, we have structured in a way so that your $500,000 is never going down. It stays intact. You get a K1 when you make an investment. That beginning of the year, what is your investment? End of the year, what is your investment? It always stays $500,000.
But they've secured a green card in 22 months
In 22 to 24 months.
for the whole family.
For the whole family, unmarried children under age of 21, not parents. Parents as a green card holder or a citizen, parents qualify. But investor spouse, and unmarried children under age of 21 qualifies.
Awesome. Thank you so much. This is something that many of our community members have been interested in. So I've learned a lot from your sharing the information. Thank you, Dr. J. So, Mark, let's go back to a question that probably you, Karen, and Raghu can chime in for the reason, how is the current media, the traditional, the print, the social media, is impacting the immigration laws and policies? I sometimes see too much hatred. I sometimes see just the one vision tunnel, which fails to express the people from the other side, especially stories like Raghu. So how do we get organized reality and peace out there? Because sometimes I just feel it's the disorganized hatred that's really winning. Or I would say organized hatred is also winning. So how important is media?
Right. Well, it's it's a real problem. That's clear. The question then is, we touched on this in the first panel. It's important. I think, in terms of solutions, and I think it's important for people to understand one another's stories. Because they're human stories. And for example, on February 13th at Mercer, we did an interfaith DACA panel. Well, it was called Immigration at the Crossroads, an interfaith dialogue. But we had 3 DACA recipients on the panel, as well as an imam, a rabbi, and a professor of Christian ethics from Mercer, Dr. David Gashi. And hearing and seeing and witnessing those stories, and it was covered by media, is very impactful. So if we can find ways, and obviously, we need to think collectively about how to find those ways of getting those kinds of stories out to the public, in the media. One of the things I told you on the phone that I regarded myself as a student of the law. I'm like, like my students, I'm a student. I'm just more advanced because I've been doing this long. But I'm still a student of the law. I'm still learning. I want to learn every day. Sitting here, for example, I've learned a number of things from just being here. One of the things I learned, I mentioned DACA, was the plight, if you will, of the children who are the H4s, and that they too should be on the radar when we talk about families and family unification. They too have stories that need to be heard. So I would like to find ways to promote human encounters where we hear one another's stories, and that's also on the other side, people who, because to revert to a more general point, this political moment that we are in, and Elena, you will remember this because you were on the panel before the November election in 2016. We had a panel called The Immigration Debate, Confronting Our Fears. And we talked about a number of fears. Fear of crime, fear of losing a job, fear of deportation, fear of terrorism. That's on both the American side as well as people fleeing terrorism from other countries. We didn't talk about some other fears that are actually pretty significant. Fear of losing your cultural identity, fear of change. The political moment we're in is fear-driven, I think. There's a lot of fear, and of course, the question is, how do you best cope with fear? I wish our therapist was still on the panel. I think you have to recognize the fear, you have to confront it, you have to name it, and then you have to acknowledge that perhaps your political opponents are afraid, so both sides, and we do that by sharing stories, by telling one another stories, and getting our stories out. But you asked about the media. And we can do that in the media. But for example, a panel like this, where you had people of different views about immigration, immigration restrictionists, as well as immigration more liberal, if you will, who could honestly discuss where they're coming from and what their stories are and why they're afraid of certain things. That would be a start. I think it's an important start. I think we need to make it. But we can also do this in small group conversations privately with one another. I'd like to see these kinds of things discussed maybe on national TV. And we would get to a better place because we would realize that we are dealing with human beings, sacred human beings, and we wouldn't then revert to these false identities and demonization and scapegoating and so on and so forth.
Sure.
So I mean, that's more, I mean, I ranged a bit from your question, but
Great.
I think...
Thank you.
Thank you.
Karen, of course, from addressing the first question, I also want you to consider, and Raghu, you too, even after we become citizens, we vote and then we run for political office, we start businesses, but still I can see that we are not there yet as belonging. We are still them and they. How can you address all these? So we talked about green card, citizen, and then you're there, and then you still feel, well, I don't know if I still belong.
So I can tell you firsthand, because I'm an immigrant from Israel, and I want to tie into what Mark was saying about fear. So my grandparents were Jewish, and in World War II, the Germans basically said that they're at fault, all the Jewish people are at fault for whatever was going wrong with Germany back then, and obviously they invaded and put them in concentration camps and almost died, and there were, very, very few survived out of my family back there. And the fear politics is nothing new. It's just the cycle that we're in right now. And to blame the immigrant and to blame the foreigner and to do them against us instead of looking at everybody's humanity as one, and having empathy and compassion, which is something that unfortunately our president does not have, and it's just unfortunate. At the same time, we are here, at least the people who are here, and in fear, and I teach that to my daughter. That fear, most of the time, is not real. Most of the time, it's in your head. And the thing to do to combat fear is to have courage and do it anyway. So recognize your fear, be afraid, and do it anyway. And so to combat the fear of immigrants in the community is really to shed a light on the truth. Get yourself educated about things like we're doing today, discussing that with as many people as you can, including the politicians and the congressmen and people that want your vote. If you're a business owner, if you know business owners, they want money. Green, right? The American way. So speak with your dollars and vote with your dollars as well. So if you know people that have influence, if you know people who vote who are U.S. citizens, and I believe that the prior panel touched on it, but call your congressman, call your senator, because they only hear from the haters. I think they have 10-to-1 ratio call of a hater versus somebody who actually supports immigration. And there's also need to be a separation of discussion between the DACA, the undocumented immigration, and the crisis that we have in the legal immigration. So lack of H-1Bs, lack of immigrant visas, and quota system that was 60-something years old, 1952. So you do the math, 66?
65.
So it's a long ways overdue if they just increased the numbers of H-1B visas and the immigrant visas, the EB1, EB2, EB3, just increase it, doubled it, it would solve the crisis.
But from what I'm seeing and hearing, not just on TV, but actually speaking to the diverse communities who have been citizens or Americans here, apart from the fear factor, they're like afraid that it's becoming a melting pot. So I understand we need to show that we are humans, we have shared goals and shared interests. What is that pushing them? Because obviously there's not many politicians who are coming and saying, okay, let's fix this. It's always about, so just trying, I know we might not have the other side here, but President Trump could come and say, but you knew it. You knew this is what the quota is, so what are you complaining about?
So it's kind of misleading because when people decide to immigrate, they don't really know about the quota. They don't really know about all of that. They really have a dream. They want to better themselves in their career. They want to better the lives of their families, et cetera, et cetera. And so only after the fact that you get here, you learn this, and you kind of learn it the hard way. Probably from Raghu's experience and in my own experience, I've had to go through multiple hoops before I got my green card, and finally, even my first visa was a struggle because I didn't have a job and I couldn't get a visa without a job. So I couldn't get a job without a visa. So it's the same problem. So really, at the end of it is a lot of luck, perseverance, and persistence that actually gets you there. And like any place, and especially with immigrants, it's hard to find their place because you don't feel 100% American, and you don't feel 100% Indian either, because you're kind of like in between. And sometimes even the second generation has it worse because they're expected to behave in your culture and in your customs and still be American when they go in school. So they have kind of like a split personality, right? So, but at the same time, there are so many benefits that you get personally as an immigrant. I mean, you grow yourself personally, spiritually, exponentially by the different experiences that you have. You provide something incredible to your family, and really, my solution to the feelings of loneliness and being stuck here and all that was really to connect with other people who have a shared experience. So I have a lot of friends here who are immigrants, and they are my family. So
Nice. Thank you, Karen. So Raghu, we talked about media. How much has your story gone out on media? And I'm sure you have a WhatsApp group with a many number of people who are going through the same stuff. But how much has it gone there? Why is it in a closed WhatsApp group? But then trying to get the story out, because there are winners. Obviously, they're doing something to win.
For WhatsApp, I can tell you why we are using WhatsApp. Many Indian communities use WhatsApp. That is the reason for using that messaging application. But still, we have very difficulty in convincing people in the backlog to come and do advocacy or go and ask their U.S. representatives or the senators. They still do not believe that being in visa, being a resident here, going and talking to lawmakers, they think like you cannot do that. So people here, as well as especially people who are in the backlog, should talk to your friends, your colleagues, your employers, your neighbors. You should get them involved, and they should know about you and bring them into this advocacy. Make the lawmakers hear about this. So that is what I expect from the people in the backlog. In regards to media, I have walked down, I have been 3 times, I visited Washington, D.C. in the last 1 year. That time, whenever I go to these offices, they were all surprised about this issue. It sounded to us that no one was representing us ever. So as the people in the backlog, when they started going there, that's when they realized, oh, this is an issue. So before, all the congressional staffers and also congressmen, and senators, many of them did not have any idea about this. Only in few places. I'm from District 7. Congressman Udall was very nice. He knows about this issue, and he's very supportive of it. So my request to the people is when you go to our community, as well as people over here, when you go talk about immigration, please include us in the talk. When there is a bill or any immigration talk is going to happen, even if you cannot give a comprehensive solution, at least give us some relief. Like there are several solutions that can be implemented in Congress at this time. There is a bill called HR 392, Fairness for Immigrants, introduced in 2017. These bills are all introduced by conservative, respected Republicans. HR 392 was introduced by Congressman Jason Chaffetz, and now it is currently owned by Kevin Yoder of Kansas. And then there is its companion bill S281 in Senate is introduced by Senator Mike Lee of Utah. And also there is a comprehensive solution, S2344, Immigration Innovation Act of 2018, introduced by Senator Orrin Hatch, that completely fixes this old visa, how you intake the people, how you grant the green card. So all these solutions exist, but nobody is acting on it. And this bill, HR 392, has 322 co-sponsors. Never in the history of US Congress this ever happened. In spite of having 322 co-sponsors, this bill is not put for a vote yet. If this bill was put for a vote, it will pass with supermajority, and both in the House as well as in the Senate. But this is not happening. The only people who are asking for these bills are people in the backlog. My request to the community is when you go and represent immigration, I'm requesting all to keep us in your thoughts and then give us a solution.
That's a great action step. So I hope you would have many followers to follow up on it. And in the follow-up email that I do send, I'll definitely include that information if you give me a few links. So Elena, 2 minutes or 3 minutes to go for the end of the session. Tell me, Elena, the individual rights, right? A citizen has his own rights, a resident might have. Irrespective of the legal status, what rights does a person have in any, not just a police encounter or a police talk, but just basically the basic rights that a person should know of, irrespective of their legal status?
Well, do you mean if they get stopped by the police?
Or yes, even if they get stopped.
They have the same rights. Whether they're illegal or lawful permanent resident or a citizen, they have the same rights with regard to when they get stopped. They still have to have a lawful stop. They still have all the constitutional rights. When they do go into, say they are in removal proceedings, they have the right to an attorney. They have a right to due process. So a lot of the constitutional rights that are available to citizens are also available to immigrants and to people who are in this country illegally or have overstayed their visa. They still get the same legal rights with regard to addressing whether or not they're eligible for any kind of relief or anything like that.
Okay, thank you. Dr. J, so any final thoughts on the EB-5 that we've not touched upon, and where can they find that information to share with colleagues and friends?
I'll take the time to answer something else that is close to my heart in terms of immigration, how we are looking at it. I want to take a minute with your permission. Legal immigration is solution to many of the problems of America. So it is what is focus, is the glass half full or half empty. I'm a geriatrician, average age of my patients, 82 years. Not many people do that or can continue to do that. The problems we have where we look at this Social Security and Medicare, the solution is for us to have more taxpayers. For every beneficiary, there is less and less number of taxpayers because of the demographics. The solution is the immigration. Solution is a legal immigration that ultimately brings in taxpayers, which we need pretty bad because ratio numbers-wise that is going down. So I think how we look at it, what we talk about, and how it is presented, rather than that being a political football or a vote bank politics, we have to encourage, and we are in America, right? Nobody is above the law. So that is where our focus really needs to be, to see that how The immigration is a solution to many, many of the problems. Our unemployment is sitting at 4.1%. Any industry we all belong to, what we find today is whether from farming, from picking up those pitches in Georgia, to healthcare industry, physicians, to IT professionals, we are not able to find skilled workers or unskilled workers. We are not able to find workers. We have a time in Georgia and Alabama when we lost all our pitches because we did not have people to pick them. So what is presented as a problem is really the solution, depending on how we look at it. That is what I would like to really see that is picking up. Many of these are taxpayers, right? Many of these people, especially on this H1, are stuck for many years. I know of people where the amnesty has gone in, where you have DACA, where these are the deferred action on childhood arrival. You have those kids, that is childhood arrival, but legal. There should be a legal deferred action on childhood arrival or deferred action on legal childhood arrival versus illegal childhood arrival. So we should really focus on the positive. There are a great lot positive sides of it, but that is not being highlighted. That is not being presented to people, so people take the misconception of it, right? And ultimately it is the immigrants that has the contribution. That is the fabric of our society, of where we are.
Definitely.
So having said that, on EB5, my last words are, it's a great program. Many of the people qualify for it. I had talking to one of the H1 groups that I belong to because I was a H1 beneficiary at some point of time in 90s. What I suggested to them is that there are four, you cannot solve all the problems, but there are 100,000 people who needs to get out of this problem. I have a 25% solution. Each one of those 100,000 families, they have 125,000 sitting. You know 3 other friends. Don't ask them to give you that 125,000, gift it, because that is what we do. We gift it to our extended family members, to friends. It is a very common thing. 25% of the problems get solved right there, right? Other 3 has $125,000 you're doing, you file your green card.
Sure.
There are some of those which are within next 2, 3, 4 years of it. Some of them, they have a high net worth. Practically speaking, you can find solution for all of these individuals. So far, you know the rules about it. You are willing to help. You are willing to take or receive help, and you can go and reach out to people in the community.
Thank you. That was really awesome. So 15-second final thoughts from our panelists, from Elena, but also speak to those who still think they came to this panel, spent some time, maybe they gathered some extra information, but their problem is still not solved because tomorrow morning they still have to get up and fight that cause again. Elena, your 15-second final thoughts. Not just your thoughts, but also to those who still think their question has not been answered on immigration. Still go to the attorney?
Oh, okay, you mean what other solution you would offer?
Yes.
I guess. I mean, attorneys can be expensive. I do think
Right.
that there are options online and things like that you can find. But if your question, you can't rely on a blog, for example, but you could rely on a lot of law firms do have answers to questions. And the government resources, USCIS, actually has a lot of answers to frequently asked questions.
Okay. Thank you so much for that resource. We really didn't talk about it. Yes, Raghu.
My request would be to the 300,000 primary applicants waiting in the green card backlog. I am requesting them to come forward, go talk to your lawmakers, federal lawmakers, and then explain this. That's how we can win this and pass something. So many people still don't believe in it. So that's what I'm working on. And when I talked to all the lawmakers, they also said, like, I'm seeing you many times. Where are the others? So that's where I want the help from the 300,000 who are in the backlog to come forward and help us in this.
Very nice. Thank you, Raghu, and continue to do the good work. Go ahead,
Yeah,
Karen.
and have courage, because a lot of immigrants do not have courage. They want to live in the shadows, and really, if everybody lives in the shadows and nobody talks about it, nothing's going to happen. So for me, attorneys are expensive, but it's more expensive not to have a good attorney. So yeah, there's a saying, somebody said, I cannot afford cheap stuff, right? Because it ends up being more expensive at the end. So the quality of your attorney is going to make or break your case. If you have good legal representation or bad legal representation, and we see cases like that every day in my office of people getting stuck and cases get denied because of bad legal representation. So same thing, like you have good doctors and not so good doctors, and the same is true with every occupation. Just because I have a degree and a diploma doesn't mean I'm a good attorney. So do your research and do your background. And final action for all of you, I kind of join what Raghu is saying, really advocate for the rights of immigrants, advocate for legal immigration, advocate for increasing the numbers for H-1B visas and the immigrant visa numbers, because this is really a crisis. And it affects more your community than anybody else, because there's over 1 billion Indians, and the per-country quotas really are not fair. But in the overall scheme of things, the number of legal immigration visas that we have from 1952 is also not fair.
Sure.
So
Karen,
really advocacy, educate yourself, educate other people, go to your senators, talk to people, and have them do the same. Because really, and you can do campaigns on social media. You can record a video with your story and go on Facebook and share your problems, and share your story and share the story of your kids and how you waited 5 days at the DMV without any result. Share that. Those kind of stories can pick up.
Sure. So this is not going to be a gotcha question, but if Raghu called on your office and asked you or your attorneys to accompany on some of the, maybe not the long trips, but a local lawmakers meeting, is that something the lawyers' attorneys' offices do, or do they refrain from it?
It depends on what it is. Like, we do advocacy, like each one of us does advocacy on certain different issues. And it depends. You do a lot of education in types of seminars like this, and just educate the public, because again, the majority of the public is really ignorant as far as immigration law, because all they hear is, oh, immigrants are here coming to steal our jobs. Well, the majority of the immigrants that are coming on EB2, EB3, H-1Bs, all those, they're actually creating jobs, and then creating good jobs. So a lot of the education and misconception, again, is you dispel it by actually talking about it and actually talking about facts and bringing real stories to life.
Great.
Instead
Thank
of,
you.
oh, the immigrants are here to take everything away.
Great. Thanks, Karen. Mark, your final thoughts.
Thank you.
20 seconds.
I endorse,
I tried, guys.
I endorse everything that's been said. I agree with all of that. But you asked if you wake up in the morning and you're still in the backlog and your situation. Well, we've heard how you can do certain things by getting involved, contacting, advocating for yourself and people in a similar position. We've heard about attorneys. But I want you, the general message, you're not alone. Not just that other people are in your situation, but one of the things that is heartening and encouraging about this political moment to me is how grassroots organizations are springing up all over the place. People are getting mobilized. For example, in Middle Georgia, we have a Middle Georgia Immigration Coalition. There's something in Southeast Georgia. We're trying to sort of forge connections, know who we are, get organized. This, what we've heard about today, this is part of what we need to address. If the worst were to come to the worst, for example, you were picked up because you'd had a DUI or you'd had an accident or something, and you ended up in Stewart, we have a rapid response team that we've just started in Middle Georgia to help the families. And then what I want to work on is how to get people connected to attorneys who can immediately help them. And one final thought, following what Elena said about rights. One of the things that the ABA and AILA, American Immigration Lawyers Association, are working on is joint task force to try and promote knowledge of crimmigration. You need a criminal law lawyer, if you ever get into a dire situation, who knows about immigration law, or who will bring in somebody who does, and who knows what the immigration consequences are and how to best to avoid them.
Okay.
So, but you are not alone. That's the
Okay, sounds
the
good.
central thing I want to
Thank you so
leave you
much,
with.
Mark. So from throughout the discussions this evening, what I've heard, and you can chime in, is collaboration. There is a human side. There should be a human side, building bridges with the mainstream, and advocacy, increasing the education awareness to prevent ignorance. And each of us has and should have the will to take action steps. Someone else is not going to do it, and that's how you get the collective goals and the collective shared outcome, so that we all enjoy. Of course, we all have to agree this is a great country. From where we are sitting comfortably here, or that side or this side, whatever our individual thoughts are, this is still a great country that has provided good education to our kids, has given us happiness, and sometimes the real discussion has to be how can we convey that to the other side, who are the policymakers and the lawmakers. So we'll just take one question because of interest of time, and I see Jafar Ji is there. So let's make this question quick so that we can continue with our dinner and then probably take leave. Go ahead. Let me give you the...
No, I'm loud enough. I'm a big mouth, don't worry. So I have a comment, first of all. Thank you very much for the great thoughts that you guys have presented. It gives a lot of valuable knowledge to the people. And but to answer Nazira's comment, how do we address or what sources of media? I believe if you buy WSB TV and radio, that is the biggest loudmouth in Georgia. Everybody would listen if you have the nerve to do that. I'm sorry, that was just to make it lighter. But I've got two questions, one for Karen and one for Jay. So Karen, you said that being represented by the right knowledgeable attorney is very important. So how do you choose that, or how do you weed out? What are your resources to weed out the best versus the average? That's for you. And for Jay, for the EB5 category, I have come across people and they ask for advice, and there are investor groups out there who are investing on the EB5 investor. So in the back, they have their own pool where they are making money. This guy is just the guinea pig who's getting his green card, and then he walks away from that. So there are groups, I know, there are a lot of investor groups. My question is, what portion of their investment, like Raghu, does he actually have to come up with any percentage of his own money or gifted money, or it can be 100% loan money? Please.
Karen.
So finding a good immigration lawyer is the hard part for a lot of immigrants, because the best thing to do is ask for a personal referral from people that you trust and had a good experience with the immigration lawyer that they're represented. Also look at reviews, online reviews of that lawyer, of that law firm, if it is reputable. And they've had a lot of clients, because really there's being immigrant sometimes is hard for us to ask the question, I might have an immigration problem, I need, a good immigration attorney. So get over the fears and ask around. And Anisha was mentioning before in my panel, ask for a second opinion as well. If you're not happy with the first one, ask for a second opinion. And even if you're happy, because some lawyers want to sell you the case and say, no problem, you can get this done. No problem, we'll file it, and then it gets denied. If somebody came for me with an EB-5, for example, I'm not going to tell them, no problem. It's going to get approved. Of course, no problem. It's not the case. Because sometimes the source of fund is not there. Sometimes the venture is not going to have the 10 full-time jobs. I mean, there's all kinds of, and then you're going to risk $500,000, and maybe you never see the money again. I mean, so again, you have to take everything under consideration. And so really do your research in advance, because it would be more expensive for you to figure it out on the other side. And if somebody's really cheap, don't go.
Sure. Elena,
I just wanted to add,
Can you-
think of it,
oh, okay, you do have it.
where is it? Oh, right here. Think of it as if you were getting surgery. If you were getting surgery, would you go to just one doctor, or would you get a second opinion? And wouldn't you ask that doctor, how many EB-5 applications have you done, right? Because any immigration lawyer can tell you that they can do it, but if they haven't done it, they should tell you, and they're not necessarily, some people will not tell you. So I think it's very important to not just see how much experience they have, but what do they have with what you want.
Good point, Elena. Jay?
And not how many you filed, it's also how many you got approved.
Right.
Definitely.
So it is a great question. I think that 95% of EB-5 investors up till recent years has been done by China. There has been a lot of scamish activity. And so there are a few basic rules. One thing I know that many of the H1 or IT guys or physicians who are out there, many of these are in US. And the root cause of why that scam did go on and it could happen were few. And when I say root cause, those were the reasons. If number one was the language barrier, which people of Indian origin don't have. We also have some Chinese investors, but I think language barriers was the biggest one. Second thing was that many of these were not real projects. Third part has been the lack of information and education on part of the investors while making that decision. None of those issues comes in where for decision making, I always suggest people that go visit the project. The decision making, ultimately, what is it that makes you decide to go with one project or the other? I tell people, if you decide to do EB-5, whether do you do it with us or do it with someone else, we always support. We always help, whatever help it is that you can do. We would not tell anything that is anything other than whole truth, right? Because at the end of the day, how it is this social networking. Before Facebook, it was present in India, okay? And very quickly, whatever part where you are from, it takes less than 20, for those who are not from India, you want to know about this, okay? And first thing is we all should have a smile on our face, happy. Life is good for everybody in America, okay? When you compare to everywhere else or what the alternatives can be. So this was not in the time of internet, 1993. My medical school classmate, my wife, after medical school, I went to my father-in-law and asked for her hand. And he lived about 60 kilometers from the city, Ahmedabad, where I was from. I traveled by bus. Before I reached home, he had already inquired in my little town. My father-in-law is a retired professor of chemistry. He taught in Science College. Before I traveled that 60 kilometers back, he had already put the feelers out. One of his students, who was a dentist in my little town, had inquired about, knew everything about my family, and next day I go home to tell my parents already knew about it. Dentist had already called and inquired about it. That is a true social networking, which exists. A business finds out, folks from Delhi, they're investors, they find out a little bit thing about me. Now with internet, everything is available. You can find information. But even when internet was not there or Facebook was not there, that part is there.
The social connection.
One characteristic or one reason how you make decision is trust. At the end of the day, you are provided, and the trust on the individuals involved in the regional center or the promoters of the project, as well as your trust in the system on US, okay? You become a shareholder of a company, right? You have to follow the rules, respect the law. Your obligation as a promoter goes way up, okay? And so you trust that, yeah, hey, USA, nobody's above the law. There are some corporate laws. There is very little that you could do wrong. If you don't feel that you look bad in stripes, people would do fraudulent activity. But in general, our laws of United States are such that people cannot do much wrong. But you trust, that is the decision making, but verify.
4 questions still stand. What percentage of the investment has to come from the investor?
So there is no, I have individuals right here in Atlanta who has gifted all $500,000, not only $500,000, plus attorney fees and all of the USC, all of the fees to someone, to their distant family members. All 100% can come from wherever. Remember the rules. You have to be able to prove legitimate source of funds, right? So no, what I call is a no solution or answer that is a Mickey Mouse solution.
Yeah, so 100% of it could be gift or a loan.
100% of it could be coming from anywhere so far there is a legitimate source.
Got it. Thank you so much. That makes sense. So let's give a big hand to all the panelists today who are here.